text Sarah?
I texted Sarah and I texted Ann, because Ann is going to be hosting. Yeah,
Right.
there they are.
They just turned
But
us
they're
on.
muted.
Yeah, he hadn't turned us on yet.
I think we're still muted.
Can you hear us?
Now I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. You've been talking away and we haven't been able to hear you. This is Sarah.
That's all right, Gail and I are catching up.
This is Sarah Mellish, Chair of the Finance Committee. It's 6:01 on Thursday, February 9th, and I will call the Finance Committee meeting to order, which is joint with the Select Board. I have with me in the room from the Finance Committee, Tom Parkins, Dean Hodis, Maury Creighton, Andy Olderman, myself, and Mike Pratt is on the phone.
Yep.
And I don't see Peter Twining. Okay, Ann?
Okay, this is Ann Harrison, acting Assistant Chair for the Select Board. We have Kathy Vallada here. We have quorum in person. Becky Jakes is with us on Zoom. So I would like to call the Select Board meeting joint with the Finance Committee to get to order. Brian?
Yep. Yes.
Ann's here.
Yes.
Kathy's here. Becky?
Yes?
I don't see John.
I can't see everyone. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the fiscal 2024 budget with respect to public safety staffing, the public safety operating budgets, and the public safety capital budgets. We had a meeting in January where each of the department's heads made a presentation to us regarding their staffing desires and suggestions. And Greg, you have sent us a memo. Is that where we should start?
Yeah, I think so. And then the spreadsheet that summarizes the various options. So if it's helpful, I could just do a high level,
That'd be great.
sort of set the stage for where things are at. So this will be a little bit of review, but I think it's worth doing just a few minutes on. So all three departments, Harbor, Fire, and Police, are confronting a changed environment from years past. On the Harbor side, it's primarily a volume-driven issue, just the number of boaters and the traffic that we see in the harbor and environs of the waters in town, and the realization that those higher volumes are more than what our current staffing can handle. And so there's a desire to, certainly during the boating season, increase on-water patrol. Looking into the crystal ball a little bit, we'll also probably see a change in authority for harbor masters and harbor staff. As part of police reform, it's likely that in order to do enforcement out on the water, you need to be academy trained, police academy trained, to conduct any enforcement out on the water. So that is another factor as we look ahead. I think we have a sound, low-cost way of handling things for this coming summer. And we talked about it, but in short form, it's freeing up the school resource officer position. Obviously, that's a school calendar service, and during the summer months, when it's the busiest boating season, that those hours dedicated to the SRO can be freed up and dedicated to the water. So that provides 40 hours a week of additional water patrol. And in addition to that, one of our remaining reserve officers is very experienced environmental enforcement and on-water enforcement of environmental laws, and would be available to help on weekends in particular. So I think that's a solution for this coming summer, and I think we should see how that unfolds and works and reevaluate again next summer,
And is,
next year.
are both Brian and the police chief on board with that?
Yeah, I mean, they can,
Yes.
yeah. So that's Harbor. On the police side, the big change is with police reform. And with police reform, all reserve officers need to be fully academy trained. And therefore, they're eligible for full-time employment. And so reserves are much quicker than we anticipated, are going after those full-time jobs, which are, there's plenty of openings out there. So we have fairly rapidly gone down from 12 reserves down to 2. And that is having a major impact on how to backfill vacant shifts for leave time. And so looking at solutions, we could try to backfill by forcing officers to take more overtime. That's very expensive. And it also is really tough on morale and just people's health. So the proposal from the chief and the department is to bring on 2 new officers to handle, to replace basically the reserves so that we can backfill. And it has the added advantage of there'll be frequent times when there would be 3 people on duty and on the day shift and evening shift, and that would allow station coverage by an officer. And so that allows us to provide that lobby coverage that we are losing as we shift over to regional dispatch. Having officers covering the station has the advantage of officers are able to do more things and provide more services to people who may be coming into the lobby. And so it has that advantage as well. And we'll get into the dollar cost, but the net cost of 2 more officers after factoring in overtime savings, that net cost is about $105,000, including benefits. So then brings us to fire. The change that we've seen in fire over the last half a dozen or so years is the loss of the call force. So the town used to have a robust call force, 20, 25 individuals. That's been slowly dropping down. We were down to 5 or so a couple of years ago. We got down to 4 or 3. And so it used to be that those call folks would provide that 4th person, large incident, whether it be fire or medical. And the 3 career people would be supplemented by that call force by 1 or 2 or so. So we've lost that. And so the question is what to do, how to regain that minimum staffing of 4, which is particularly important for the larger medical incidents and any active fires. With active fires, there's what's called the 2 in 2 out rule that we've heard about. If there's 2 people in the structure that's on fire, you should have 2 out to back them up and make sure that if something does go awry, that they have immediate assistance to get out of a bad situation. So the question then becomes how to do that. In the last couple of years, you've added an additional staff to the department. We had 12, which was 4 groups of 3. And then we've added a floater, 2 floaters as in an effort to cut down on overtime. That has not been as successful as we certainly had hoped in terms of reducing overtime, as we had some retirements and some people leave. And so that has been a challenge to maintain the overtime budget in a reasonable fashion. We're not doing well in the current year. We need to think about how we're going to finish up the next 5 months without continuing at the burn rate that we currently are on, because we don't have the budget for that. And so So, some options, there are a number of different options that were spelled out. And I think this is the hardest of the three, if you will, to come up with a solution. Whether or not we want to hire two more, giving us 16 career firefighters, that would be 4 people on the 4 different crews. Doing so would allow us to have 4 on, 40 to 60% of the time, so call it 50% of the time. You would have the 4 on, certainly much better than we have now, which is the 3. And so you'd achieve that 50% of the time. My big concern, I don't have any problem doing that as if that were the solution. My concern is that the model really requires to go higher. In order to get to 100%, which is the goal, if we continue on that path, it would mean additional hiring. And I struggle with that large of a force for a small community. Can do it. It's as I always say, it's about choices and budgets and where you put your dollars. But that would be an unusually large department for a town our size. Now, we do offer what I would call a premium service with the ALS ambulance, advanced life-saving support for an ambulance. That is a premium service, and I think the voters, residents value that service. And I think that service can continue. The question becomes how to do it, how to provide the service for those larger fire events. And so bottom line is I would support adding 2 new firefighters to the budget, but I would stop there and I would pursue alternative models going forward. Whether that be cross-training to try to bring in a reconstituted call force for that remaining 50%, whether it means aggressively pursuing some regional solutions down the road over the next 3 years. I think those warrant our full attention going forward, rather than go to a scenario where we have a department of 20 or 22. That would certainly provide that guaranteed 4 on, 24/7. It seems it's an awful lot of money for an additional surety. Obviously, we all want to be as safe as possible, but it's a risk-benefit analysis and a calculation, how you want to proceed. Assuming that we can maintain manage the overtime with the additional 2, there should be significant savings in overtime, and the net cost of adding those 2 firefighters is about $80,000. So between the 2 proposals, both fire and police, you'll be adding $185,000 to the budget. That is, just in comparison's sake, that is lower than the savings that we're achieving with the dispatch. So your net cost year to year for public safety is not growing under those scenarios. So from a cost perspective, it's doable. But again, of course, it's always about the choices you want to make. So that is an overview of where we are with the staffing. We can run through the different scenarios and obviously answer questions you have. The 2 chiefs are here and the lieutenant's here to help out with questions you may have. I told Brian that he didn't need to spend the evening here, but he's available by phone if we have questions and we can get him on Zoom. So he had a long night here the other night, so I thought we'd give him a break tonight. So let me stop there and turn it over to all of you to ask your questions and to have the discussion.
So if people have a question, let me know and I'll call on people. We have, Gail, for the record, Peter Twining is also on the phone, so everyone from FinCom's here. I guess I'll raise a concern. For each of the last 2 years, we've added a firefighter position. And each time we've done that, we were told that it would decrease overtime. And each year it has not. So my concern is, how do I know that if we add more people, we're gonna really have this overtime savings? If not, it's gonna cost us a lot more than 80,000. And that's, you know, I've seen nothing that has shown us that they can manage their overtime budget. And I don't see that changing.
I'd be happy to speak to that.
Let me take a couple more questions first, if you don't
All
mind.
right.
Becky Jakes?
Hi, thank you. And thank you to Ann for taking the meeting this evening. I had two different questions just right off the bat. With getting 40 additional hours from the SRO during the summer for on the water enforcement, do we have the vessels rather, to have the number of people on the water we would like?
Do you want to take that, Tom?
Yes, we have the orange safe boat, and that's what they typically would use when they're on patrol during the summertime. So as it works now, we have one officer with one of Bion's staff, and they typically operate that orange safe boat, with Bion staff being in the other boats, the other two boats, the pump out boat and the Eastern.
And in addition to that question though, when you have, is that boat that the police have, is that the one that's able to go into shallower areas?
I don't know what the draft is on it. I don't think it can get in too shallow, but obviously if they needed to get into shallow waters, they would take the Eastern, I would assume. That'd be a question for Bion.
Yeah, it's not as, it draws more than the Eastern. The Eastern is the boat that really services the shallow areas in an emergency. But the short answer to your question is we have those 3 vessels that we can utilize for on-water patrolling and service.
And those are in fairly good shape. We're not worrying that we'll go ahead and get the staffing, but then we're going to have, and I know you can't plan for every incident that happens, but they're good and serviceable for this summer.
They are. So the Eastern has been replaced.
Yep.
So that's
The Eastern has been replaced, and the 2 motors on the safe boat were replaced last year.
right. So yes, they're in good shape at the moment.
Great, okay, thank you. I have one other question. I guess this is really for, thank you, Chief, by the way, sorry.
Yep.
Thank you, Chief. For Chief Cleary, and this one is about the stipends that are given for firefighters annually, once they're trained. So it says annual stipend once trained, so every year, a trained firefighter gets a $5,000 stipend?
No, that was proposed for new call firefighter stipends that were proposed by the town administrator.
And, okay, then the other question would be, and I guess this might be for Greg then, if we do offer a stipend, is there any, do they get it a year after they've completed work for us? So that we're not just saying,
Can
just
we
get
hold
trained
on that
firefighter.
question for a minute, Becky? Because I'd like to get into a discussion more about how the call firefighter with the police would work.
Absolutely,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Mike Pratt?
Yeah, so I just had 2 quick ones. One was, you stole my thunder, Sarah, so I was gonna ask that same question about, you know, the OT, and we've hired 2 floaters, and it certainly didn't work, but, so I'm just seconding your point on that one. But then my second question, I guess, is for Greg. You know, one of the things we talked about at the last meeting was, you know, you brought up a lot of good points in this document about ways, you know, to create efficiencies, you know, with the fire department, maybe regionalization and all these other ideas. But the one that we talked about in the last meeting that wasn't in this memo was the concept of, on the inspections, you know, the total volume, right, of calls to the fire department, 25%, I believe, was these, you know, CO detector or smoke detector inspections. And the idea I thought was, right, we could find somebody, you know, who's more on a, you know, whatever, building inspector side, you know, that could do those kind of inspections, and then that, you know, lightens the load on the fire department, right?
Yeah, so that's still a possibility. I'm finding that it's harder for a building inspector to become a fire inspector than it is for a fire inspector to become a building inspector. So that's taken a little bit of the wind out of the sails for that concept, not completely, but it's just, it has indicated it's not gonna be quite as easy as perhaps once thought.
Fair enough, but to the degree it's not completely dead, I just think we leave it as one of the feathers in the cap with all these things that you're talking about as potential efficiency gains, that's all.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. It's a little off topic from that emergency response, that initial response to any emergency. You know, offloading the responsibility certainly lightens the load in general at the department, but it doesn't solve the problem of having 4 people to respond.
Yeah, no, that's fair, I guess my understanding was just, you know, when we're talking about adding new staff for the fire department, we're doing it under the context of the total number of calls, which would include those inspection calls, but if I'm
Right.
wrong on that, then I'm wrong, but I thought that was the context.
No, you're right. You're correct. It's a little different from emergency response. That's all I'm highlighting.
No, I guess then what I would say to that point is, then we shouldn't be talking about the 1,450 calls, we should adjust it out, right, so that we're only talking about, like you said, the true emergency calls, that's all.
Nope, good point.
Kathy Bellata?
So, my questions, we've had a lot of good information presented to us. It's all cost related.
So Andrea has produced those waterfall charts. If you want to put them up, we can.
Okay, that savings, I'm definitely interested in, yep. I'm also interested in revenue. So if we want to talk about something easy for a minute, on the harbor side, I believe those salaries, et cetera, are paid for by mooring fees and
Right.
according to what's in the annual report.
Yes.
Okay, so I would also suggest we look at our fee structure, and is there opportunity to squeeze out more public safety hours, you know, by right-sizing our fees? I can tell you I don't know how much we get in from the temporary, transient boaters, thank you. Okay, I don't know how much money we get from that, but our fee is incredibly low. You could double it easily. So I don't, it still may be small dollars, but I'd like us to seriously look at revenue in addition to cost.
Can we kind of
yeah.
wait on that until we get to the budget piece and just talk about staffing at this point?
Okay, it was about staffing, but it was leading into that. And
Okay.
on the fire side, as relates to staffing, if we get a new person in, can they do more inspections? So I just want us to be looking at from a staffing standpoint, if we think we need to fund another FTE, are we looking at ways to raise the revenue so it's not all tax? So it's kind of related to that. That's what I was getting at. I'm done.
Maury?
So I have 3 questions, but I think they're pretty manageable. Greg, you mentioned about a $185,000 ad, and I'm curious what that looks like out at year 2, 3, and 4. Does that 185 stay about like that with a 2.5% increase
Right.
pretty much constantly?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question is about fire inspections. Is there a commercial entity that does this? So take it, I mean, you know, somebody who does fireinspections.com or Fire Inspections R Us, out of Salisbury, you know, and they come and visit Manchester once a week. And I don't know if that avenue's been explored, but it seems like there's an opportunity
The chief
there.
to see
Most of those type of companies work for the individual places and would do the inspections on like a factory or a business, and they come in and do your smoke detectors.
Yep.
But I'm not aware of any municipality that contracts with a private agency, because there are certain liabilities associated with that and certain information that's better stayed within the fire department than with the private entity doing it, with respect to oversight, control, authority, everything like that under the state fire code, as opposed to somebody that just can go and do your inspections of your fire extinguishers or something like. I'm not aware of anybody that does that.
So in the commercial world, you have sprinklers, you have companies like Metro, Swift, and
Right.
others that do installations in
Yes.
commercial facilities. Would they come into town and offload part of that responsibility if we
They
paid
would,
them as a commercial?
likely they would only do the contracts for the sprinklers that they were responsible for, and what they then do is they submit those test reports to both the owner of the property and then when we, and or us, but when we come to do the annual inspections, that's something we look and we ask the owner for. So it's not exclusive, but we add that into our package as part of our inspection.
And then the last question, Greg, is just, I thought I just heard this when you were talking about with fire. If we went to 4 groups of 4, that would cover us, but you said sometimes only like 50% of the time. And I'm curious why that is, because 4 groups of 4, well, 3 groups of 4 would cover you for 24 hours, I presume, and then a 4th is for vacation and fill-in, and how do we get to 50% on?
So it takes 4 crews to staff, and the chief can do this better than me,
Yeah.
to do the 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 4 off, 5 on. 5 off. So each crew works a day, has a day, so it's a 24-hour day,
Okay,
then they're off for 24 hours.
Yep.
On for 24 hours, and then off for 5 days.
okay,
So it takes 4 crews in that rotation to staff every day.
okay,
So right now, we have 4 crews with 3 people on each crew.
Yep.
So that's the
Oh,
12.
I think I know what you mean. I think what you're saying is how does 4 not covered 100% of the time?
right,
4 firefighters are assigned 100% of the time, but if one of them is off on vacation, we drop to 3. So on that day, we're not at 100% 4, we're only at 3. And based on the amount of leave people accrue over the course of the year and take it,
right,
it would be 50% of the time, it would be likely at least one person was out on vacation. So that 4 on duty would drop to 3.
okay. So the 50% number is going from a full crew of 4 availability to a crew of 3 availability?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Are you done?
yes, sorry,
Okay.
thanks.
Peter Twining.
Yes, this is a question for the fire chief. It has to do with overtime. One of the important offsets cost here is a reduction apparently in overtime of $120,000. What percentage of your overtime spending does that represent? And how will you accomplish it? I've been on the FinCom 3 years, and each year we seem to have an increasing amount of overtime. Can you help me understand how we'll accomplish it, given my past history?
Sure. Is this where you'd like me to address
Sure,
yours as
Chief.
well? So when we had our floater for the past 2 years, the single floater, one of our employees was out multiple times over 2 years on extended medical leave. So knowing that he was going to be out 6 months, 8 months, long-term, the floater that would normally cover other vacancies was assigned to fill that known vacancy for that period that he was out. So you immediately lose the ability of that floater to cover any other shift, because now he's assigned to a shift as a regular firefighter. So that shift maintains continuity, but now you don't have that extra person to cover the other vacations that a floater is normally designed to do. So that was almost for the last 2 years prior to his retirement that the floater was covering Captain Bigger's position. You guys added the second floater last year. Shortly after the second floater, we were in the fiscal year in August, we had Captain Bigger retired and Lieutenant Herendeen left. That left 2 vacancies. So we had to hire, so those floaters that we needed to hire, the floaters went to cover those vacancies because they were known shifts that we would be down a person. When we hired the 3 new firefighters, 2 of which would be the newest floaters, they were not fully qualified as firefighters because they've yet to go to the academy. So they're able to run medical calls, but they're not able to fully function as a firefighter. Therefore, if a full-time permanent firefighter was out, they could not be relied on to fill their slot because then we would not be at the proper 3 staffing.
But why didn't you drop down to 2 like the prior fire chiefs did when you knew you had a problem with your overtime budget?
I did very briefly, and this goes back to the letter I sent back last August saying that we were definitely going to be running into problems and going over with overtime, and I gave 4 potential solutions of those overtime at that time as to how to deal with the problem. The reason is 2 is unsafe for us to operate on day-to-day calls. It also makes us unavailable to go mutual aid because the mutual aid minimum is 3 firefighters per piece of apparatus responding out of town. So that would have taken us totally out of the mutual aid game from us being able to provide it to anybody. Plus, with only 2, we would be needing to call in mutual aid to supplement the missing firefighter that much more often. So the mutual aid at that point wouldn't have been mutual. So we continue to try and staff as best possible to 3, which is the bare minimum in our estimation and national standards and best practice that we shouldn't operate anywhere with less than that, other than a simple medical call. So that's where we continue to try and fill with overtime to stay at that 3 level until the new firefighters are trained up and have graduated from the academy and are able to be plugged in like the permanent firefighters we already have. So for the 3 years we've had the 1 floater and then the 2 floaters, there's been extenuating circumstances which has prevented them from fulfilling their role as they were designed to fill. And the savings ultimately in going to 4 groups of 4 is 1 person can be out sick before you have to have, or on vacation before you have to hire overtime. So instead of being at 3 and hiring every time 1 person's out to get 2 back up to 3, we would be able to drop to 3 and stay at 3. We would need 2 people out, 1 on vacation and 1 sick, before we would have to hire overtime moving forward if we were in the 4 groups of 4 model.
Okay, thank you. Andy, did you have any questions?
Yeah, a couple of things. So if an inspection is happening during the day, what happens when a call comes in?
If they're on the inspection, they probably have to leave, or we end up having to get to the inspection at some other time and call the person when we get back to the station.
And with the current 4 times 3 plus 2 floaters,
Mhm.
I'm trying to get a sense of how many incidents there have been where we've been, truly caught short. Presuming in most instances, if it's something significant, it's probably a mutual aid situation anyway.
Well, the larger incidents will definitely be mutual aid.
Yeah.
We're looking for the staffing to be able to do what we can on the day-to-day thing. If we have 3 more often, we're calling mutual aid that much more often. If we're staffed at 4, there's much more we can do on scene and it's a much safer. Because the 2 in, 2 out rule is not just for large structure fires. It's the OSHA mandate that defines any time 2 firefighters have to enter an environment that's immediately dangerous to life and health. It's called IDLH. That could be a large structure fire with smoke. It could be a building filled with carbon monoxide. It could be a hazardous materials spill in a building. anything that's going to jeopardize their life and health that forces us to go onto breathing apparatus or have that available triggers the 2 in, 2 out. So that could be on a daily basis. We had a mercury spill at someone's house. That would be an IDLH environment. If we get a carbon monoxide alarm go off and we get there and we get to the door and we have a reading on the meter already, that's an IDLH environment, which means nobody should be going in that house to do a rescue or an investigation until we have at least 2 people outside in case something happens to them. So there are more cases that fall under that umbrella than just large structure fires.
Okay, thank you. Did you have another question, Wendy?
I was just trying to get a sense of like the number of times where we've run into that. Like how often does that happen?
All the time. I mean, we go on carbon monoxide detector activations weekly. Same with fire alarm activations.
And so when that happens, you show up and you got 3 people.
In theory, no one's supposed to go in there
Yeah,
until we have a 4th person showing up on scene.
is that what happens?
Not always, no.
Okay, I've got 2 more questions on the phone, I think, and then I think we'll discuss the call firefighter situation.
Can I ask?
Go ahead, Andy.
How many, members of the fire department are qualified to do inspections?
For the standard smoke detector inspections, 26F, there's no real additional training required for that, so we do in-house training on that. As far as plans reviews for new buildings, I am the only one qualified currently. We have a couple people that have taken inspector classes, but haven't taken the exam to actually get qualified yet. None of them are actually Fire Prevention Officer 1 or 2, which is the mass standards that govern those, that have continuing education requirements and things like that.
Hi, John.
Hi, John.
Good evening.
So some have taken the training and are getting more experience, but we don't really have qualified fire inspectors as we did when Captain Bigger and Lieutenant Herendeen were here.
Right. My second question, when you go to a CO2, carbon monoxide alarm, I think you said you had a meter,
Yes,
so it's not just any carbon monoxide alarm. It's one that shows that in fact that there is a hazard.
well, we use the precautions as if, in theory, responding to that type of call makes us wary that it could be an IDLH environment, but we try not to get too far in it because it could have that environment in the basement, but we're standing at the front door and we don't know yet.
Okay, thank you.
So,
I've got a question.
Go ahead, Brian.
Hi, Chief. We keep talking about mutual aid, or you keep, referring to it.
Yep.
So, and how many people have to leave the station on a mutual aid call?
we have to have 3 on an engine or a ladder to
Okay.
go mutual aid.
So that leaves, how often does that leave us empty in the house?
Usually every time we have to go mutual aid.
Okay. Does that,
So the numbers,
We went mutual aid.
I think your report said 150. We went out 150 times. and
Well,
we had
most
50.
of the time it's the ambulance. The ambulance is the biggest mutual aid piece, which 2 people go on the ambulance, it leaves 1 behind. But if it's a fire call,
okay.
everybody goes on the engine or the ladder and responds.
So then, no one's covering Manchester while we're, so
Correct.
then we have to wait for mutual aid if there's an incident that happens here in town.
Yes,
And you said this happens all the time.
yes. Well, like the other night, we were in Essex from 11:30 to about 3:30 in the morning. And there was nobody back on coverage. So during that entire period of time, mutual aid would have been first due to anything we had in town.
So hours at a time.
Yes,
And sometimes it's just to cover another, if it wasn't an emergency like Essex, but it would be just to cover another engine house.
yes,
So we're covering someone else's and then we're empty until we
Yeah.
get to, okay.
And it's the same thing, I've talked with Essex and Gloucester,
Seems like
and
a domino effect.
they're aware when we go. Well, like the other day, we had a brush fire. And we had, the officer had Essex come to the scene and had Wenham come to station coverage. And we do that if the event that we have looks like it's going to escalate, we move companies in sooner.
Okay, we need to move on from this, I think.
Just
Um,
asking.
That's a good question.
I've got two people on the phone. Mike, did you have another question?
Yeah, just real quick, I guess I'm building on Maury's point about, potential for third-party contracting for the inspections. And then I was just thinking about, and so this back to Greg, how we share, IT with Danvers, and I think we share animal control. So, maybe there's an opportunity to share on that fire inspection, right? In which case, probably we just be, maybe paying a bigger department, right? Like Beverly or Gloucester, who, might have that, experience, whatever, in-house. So that's it. Last idea.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Peter, did you have another question?
We did, which is back to overtime. What's the assumption about the new hires? Will they need to go to the fire academy? Will that leave us again with the need for a lot of overtime to cover their absence?
Well, we would put them on shift as extras like we have the ones we have now, but they wouldn't be fully qualified till they went to the academy. Our new group's going to our two newest firefighters are going either in March or May. And then we have interviews this Tuesday where we're interviewing 8 to replace the new firefighter we had who left after 2 months. So we will have an eligibility list available. But by contract and by training, they will still need to go to the fire academy.
But
So
Peter, we wouldn't
we're
be
gonna
back,
have about the same amount
Well,
of overtime.
hold on, wait a minute.
sorry,
Greg?
sorry. We wouldn't be backfilling those new hires, because that's going from 3 to 4. So it would not be the same need
Yeah.
as we had this past year.
Peter, did you have another thought?
Yes, but will it add up the money we're now taking into account here of $120,000 of reduction in overtime? It sounds like we're gonna still need that because we're gonna have new firefighters off at the academy.
Right.
So I think we're being over optimistic, Chief, unless there's something I'm missing here.
No, well, the new firefighters, if they're not trained, will not be getting paid overtime because they won't be able to fill overtime. And we won't need the overtime because they'll be extras until they're trained to go on the respective shifts as the 4th person.
How are they extras if you're talking 4 people per shift? I don't get where the extras come from.
Because you're sticking with 3. You're only gonna go to 4 when those new people are fully trained and available.
So we're paying extra firefighters,
There's a lag,
but they're not
there's a
doing
lag
much.
period.
They're doing a lot because the ones we're hiring are paramedics and those are the primary calls. So there's nothing preventing them from doing emergency medical care, and they do have limited firefighting duties as we continue to train them in-house. They're just not fully certified to take over the role of a full-time firefighter who's been there. So that's the difference. So there is some utility. It's not they're sitting around. They are running calls, they're training, they're driving trucks.
So I have a question. So those folks, they can work pretty much full-time, but you have to go to mutual aid right away if they're the 3rd person in the house and there's a fire issue.
Yes, we have one group that's running like that now because of the retirement. There's 2
Okay.
full-timers and we have 1 extra, one of the new trainees, but in order to have that group at 3, we have to hire somebody
Right.
on overtime.
Or maybe you always put them front line for any call that's EMT.
Yeah,
so
that's
that
what
if you
they do.
If you do run the risk of a fire,
Yep.
they're not involved in that
They're
decision.
usually, and if we have a dual response, they are on the ambulance.
Yep.
So
Okay.
that's how we make best use
I
of those
think we
skills.
need to get to the call firefighter
I've just got one
discussion.
question about the overtime.
Okay.
Of the overtime, how much of that is quote unquote, to fill in for sick, ill, or on vacation? And how much of that is detail, like private detail, is that? part of
Private
that?
detail is billed separately.
Okay,
And
so
it's
that
billed
doesn't-
right to the con, so
so
our
that-
blasting details, our hot work details,
That's not part of this.
Okay,
that's not part of it.
Okay.
Just one quick question on the definition of overtime. That overtime cost is net of what regular time is, correct? In other words, you're paying somebody overtime. You normally, if whatever regular time is X, and overtime is X plus something,
Plus 1.5
Time and a half?
time and a half or whatever, so when I see these overtime numbers, it's the half.
No, it's a
No,
time and a
no,
half.
it's beyond their normal work.
I understand, but you would have to fill that in with a regular person, and when you hire an additional person.
But they're getting leave time. They're getting paid sick time or vacation time. They're getting their regular pay
Yeah.
all the time.
And a
Okay.
second
Someone
person
filling
is
in the
being
same
paid
spot.
time and a
We're
half.
basically paying one spot twice,
Yeah,
2.5 times.
2.5 times.
2.5 times
Two
what
and
it
a
is.
half.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Okay, can we move to the discussion about call firefighters and how we envision that might work? We seem to have something before us that indicates that some of the police officers and perhaps some DPW would be trained to act as call firefighters. And I'm wondering what impact that would have on the police department while they're being trained, et cetera. What's involved in this whole process? Normally it's volunteers, so it's not an employee's time.
Right, so the officers would need to undergo their fire training off hours.
Oh, is that what the expectation is?
That would be the expectation.
Okay.
So that's what that $8,000 stipend represents. And again, this is hypothetical because we haven't negotiated with the unions, but, so,
So can you explain the two stipends?
sure. So if you look at the bottom of that spreadsheet, so the second line, police officer, DPW in training, get $8,000 a year for undergoing the training. Again, an assumed number, an estimate on my part. So I said 5 people in the first year would do that, so 5 times the 8,000 is that 40,000. And then, once they're trained, then I made the assumption that it's a $5,000 a year stipend for maintaining your qualification. And so I assumed we had one person who was already trained, and they would start doing that the first year. And the second year, we would have 6 people trained, that's the 30,000, and then in year 3, I assumed we would have 7 people trained.
And what happens to the police and/or the DPW staffing when somebody has to go on a call? Are they doing this during the normal hours, or are they doing it when they're not working as a police officer or DPW?
So I would envision like we've discussed, the officers on duty, on actual patrol would maintain their actual patrol, but that third officer who would be inside, if he's a call firefighter trained, could transition to a safe lobby and respond. And then also calling people in.
What other questions do we have on the call firefighter situation? Maury?
I'm just curious about the level of training for a call firefighter from police or DPW or some other place, and what that costs. What's the time and cost commitment?
So time-wise, it's
240 hours
240
of
hours
training.
of training.
But that would be done on their own time.
Correct.
Some of that's in person,
What's
some is
240 hours, 6 weeks?
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
No, the majority of that's in classes.
It is.
Yeah,
60
Tuesday,
days of
Thursday,
4-hour
like
classes.
Tuesday, Thursday nights and Saturdays for like 6 months.
Okay.
Similar to the Reserve Police Academy, how that was.
Okay.
It's a lot of hours. And cost-wise for that training?
To actually, to receive, I think that's provided,
Yeah, that,
Free of-
it's,
free of
the
charge. There's no
academy,
charge
the
for the
academy part of
academy.
it is free.
It's good to know. Okay, thanks.
Andy?
Yeah, what's your sense, Chief Fitzgerald, of the interest that there might be?
So we've had like real early discussions, Greg and I, with the full-time union, and we based it on probably over 50% have some interest in it.
Okay. And are there other communities that we know of that do
Not,
this?
not that I know of.
No.
And same for, has there been discussion on the DPW side?
We haven't had that discussion. We're starting in on negotiation next week.
Yeah.
So this is not something you can take to the bank.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it's, there's still,
It's a plan B.
right.
Has there been any sort of interest from anyone from the community, you know, over time, pops in occasionally, just have an interest in call firefighter?
There were a couple of people previously.
Yeah.
That had expressed interest.
Does that go anywhere, or?
Well, it didn't at the time because
Yeah.
the call department was dwindling and the plan was to deactivate it completely. So no money and time was invested at that point because we were heading towards it being.
Okay, I wasn't aware that we had a plan officially, but, okay, I thought it was just kind of dwindling on
Yeah.
its own.
Is there a way to do, not the full training, but a grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 cut at this? Because 240 hours is 60 days of 4-hour classes. I mean, for people who work regular jobs and have to drive, and that's a huge commitment. And just trying to figure, is there a way to cut that commitment
Well,
somehow?
let me speak to you. That call academy is 200, just for comparative, it's 240 hours. The full-time firefighters, it's 800 hours at the academy. So there's a significant training level difference between the full-time firefighters and the call firefighters. Plus, the full-time firefighters continue to get experience because that's the job they do. The call firefighters only get as much experience for the calls that they actually show up on. So to your point, 240 is a lot of hours, but that's the minimum to be certified as a call volunteer firefighter. And that's the minimum that has always been in our rules. And that's part of the challenge because not only that is the commitment, but then it's the commitment off hours. And the other problem, and competing with life and time, to decide to come in, is it worth it? And that was a challenge we had with the call department before it dissolved, was that people had other interests. That's not their primary job. It may not even be their secondary job. They may want it as a hobby. And that level of commitment is far different than people who have dedicated themselves to a firefighting career and are doing it full time. So if people get it and then decide not to come, or they live too far away because there aren't many people that live in town, and that, which was part of our problem, is it doesn't help us if they live 20 minutes away or 3 towns over.
But that would be different if it's police officers trained.
Well, if it's only one police officer coming from the station, that's just one individual. It doesn't make up a whole secondary crew to take another truck out the door.
But it gives you your fourth person, particularly for a medical call.
It doesn't, see, that's a misunderstanding. That's not how the call department functions. The way the call department functions is, we have a call, our full-timers go out the door on the truck to the call. The call firefighters get it on their phone that there's an alarm. They respond to the station because that's where their gear is kept. They're at the station until they have enough call firefighters together to make a crew to man a second piece of apparatus to then take it to the scene.
You're talking about a fire, is that correct?
Yes.
Not an EMT response?
No, if we've done the EMT response, they respond to the station, and then they cover the station, and they're there in the event we have a second call. Because if they show up there by themselves, there's nothing for them to take, because there aren't enough to make up a crew to take a call, and they would stand by at the station.
But if you had, let's say, a second ambulance call,
Mm-hmm,
and you have a staff of 3,
mm-hmm.
and you now have a police officer that's EMT trained and has
Yep.
been willing to say, yes, I'll be a call firefighter.
Yep.
Can't that police officer be the second person to be able to have that quote-unquote ambulance to respond to a different medical
So
situation.
this is what would happen, if we had 3 people in the station and we had a medical aid call. Two of the paramedics respond in the ambulance, and the officer responds in the squad. So the 3 full-timers are already on scene at the first call. And usually, the police officers on patrol respond there as well. So if there was a second medical aid call, the call firefighter would come to the station. Where we don't have a second ambulance, they would be at the station. And that's where they would stay, because there's nothing else for them to take. The officer who's in the squad would respond from that one medical call over to the other medical call, and the mutual aid ambulance would come to transport the patient.
But the police officer could also respond to that second call.
Yeah, but they would normally, the patrol officer would be responding anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you had a second.
I think Sarah's trying to get at the officer that in the safe lobby could transition to safe lobby and respond.
Yeah, that's a potential, yes.
Okay. Greg, do we have any information on the large number of towns around us who seem to be able to maintain a significant call firefighter group, and some have full-time plus call and some are all call? How can they maintain that and get people interested when little old Manchester can't? But Hamilton can, Wenham can, Rockport can, Essex can.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to that. You know, towns have different cultures and different histories. And it is not uncommon that when you create a career force, that is a detriment to the call force.
But the other towns have seemed to be able to overcome it.
So Essex and Rockport are both all call.
Right, but Wenham and
Wenham and
Hamilton.
Hamilton are a combination.
Middleton and Linfield too.
Yeah,
Ipswich.
there are plenty of examples that have
Yep.
it. I'm not saying that they're not.
Did you have a question, Mike?
Yeah, just a follow-up from the conversation between Chief Cleary and Andy. You mentioned this plan to kind of wind down the call department, and I guess I didn't know that there was such a plan. I mean, I understood that the numbers were low and, you know, people weren't running to sign up, but I never understood there to be a agreed upon plan to actively wind it down.
Well, in the previous budget, it was proposed to eliminate that line.
But before then,
No, not before then.
As it dwindled, and as we ran the numbers and looked at the cost-benefit analysis of the call department as it approached budget time, it was clear that it wasn't fulfilling any role. We were making less than 2% of the calls. Only one was an EMT. 2 were leaving to go to other full-time departments. And it really had no future and hadn't had future and had been on a decline. So the goal with that it was a $30,000 line item budget that I presented as that money would be better served with a full-timer that would be reliable, and to put that towards a full-time salary than to continue to try and juggle a call force that was not effective in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I guess I'd say 2 things. Number one is 30,000 or whatever the number is in the context, you know, of a 1.4, just to pick a number, budget is a pretty small in percentage terms. But, you know, to the degree that any kind of organization needs to sustain and or grow, I mean, there needs to be, right, a promotion of it. There needs to be, you know, active encouragement of it. So, yeah, I just, you know, on a cost-benefit basis, I'm not sure I come to the same conclusion.
Maury?
I just have a question about the training and how many people we have trained who have moved on. And I think this is an important one because it's all tied together. You bring somebody on board, you pay them while they're being trained. We're using overtime to backfill this. The number of people that come to Manchester, get trained, and go somewhere else is important. And I'm curious if you can tell us how many that is.
Only one in my tenure. There were several before that that went to Gloucester. And that's primarily because they lived in Gloucester. And the other part is Gloucester is on a 56-hour shift schedule. So it was anywhere between a $10,000 and $20,000 theoretical salary bump for them to go from Manchester to Gloucester.
But they got their training here.
Yes.
And leveraged that or used that and then went. So I guess the question is, how many people do we train who leave the department without retiring? They go somewhere else to make
One
money
in my
somewhere
tenure,
else.
but he had been here 11 years.
Okay.
And then part of, and this is part of the staffing that we haven't talked about yet, is the need for a second in command and a deputy chief, because there is no succession planning or longevity within the department. So anybody that comes into a small department, there are only 4 officer positions. They don't turn over all that often, and then there's nowhere to go from that. It's too big a leap to go from a shift officer as a lieutenant to the chief, and there's no step in between for anybody to aspire to. So if people have other career aspirations, then that is another factor which affects them looking at other places once they reach a certain longevity within a department. If there are more opportunities, which there are in larger departments.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Kathy, did you have any more questions? Dean? Tom? Ann? Andy?
I think I'm good.
Brian?
No, I'm good.
John?
Could I point out just one more thing with respect to the call department that I forgot to mention? Based on Greg's calculations, the call force, as described, would cost $69,500 for 7 part-time firefighters, where the net cost for 2 full-time firefighters to get us to the staffing level I asked for is $80,000.
That's only if you can keep the overtime down, and that's a big if.
Just saying that the gap between those two is only $10,500 between 7 part-time firefighters that may or may not make it to the station and may or may not make it to the scene versus 2 full-time dedicated career firefighter paramedics that are rolling out the door on every call and are there at least 42 hours a week as part of their regular schedule to be relied on for the 2 in, 2 out.
Right, so the critical piece is this overtime management.
Yep.
So right now, you're on track to spend 200,000 more than your budget.
Yes.
We don't have those dollars.
And that refers back to my letter back in
And-
August.
And you were told to drop down.
It was suggested to me that I look at dropping to 2, because I believe it came from the Finance Committee, the advisory board. In my opinion, as a fire chief,
And where's the money coming from, chief?
dropping down to 2 is unsafe.
But where's the money coming from? Until you have the money, you can't spend it.
I've had this
That's a problem.
conversation for the past 3 years with respect to telegraphing. We have been out of overtime for the past 6 years, which is 3 years before I've been here.
That's fine,
By
but
December.
to sit there and say, you've been overspending your overtime budget, either you or the prior chief,
Mhm.
for 6 years.
Mhm.
We've hired 2 new people to
Mhm.
decrease the overtime,
Right?
and now you're miraculously gonna cut your overtime? I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening.
The problem with some of the overtime and going over is I have continually requested the amount of overtime I thought we would need to maintain the staffing that I feel is safest. And by the time, when we come to the final budget, it gets cut. So I already know I'm not gonna make it to do staffing levels, and then for the past 3 years, we've had unexpected things with a catastrophic injury and 1 firefighter having to retire, being out of work sick for most of those 2 years.
Yeah, we've heard that. I mean,
Well, you've heard it, but it's the facts. That's
I
why
would-
I'm saying I can only budget based on what I know. And if there's not enough to make the minimum, and there's not a cushion in there for these catastrophic events, which have happened 3 times in 3 years, then that's how we end up in this particular situation, because then there's no buffer to handle the outside the box things that we didn't see coming and that I couldn't budget for.
But I worked in corporate America for 47 years, we had no buffers, and either you came in with your budget or you were fired. That's all there was to it. So I have no confidence that by hiring 2 new firefighters, we're going to see a reduction in the overtime budget. Therefore, I think that cost will be much greater than what's being presented here. That's my concern.
Okay.
So where do we head now?
I have a slightly larger concern, and
Okay.
it's probably, maybe not entirely for this forum, but when I hear the town manager saying he's instructed to do this, and I don't know what the Board of Selectmen say, but when the fire spends that, that's a problem. That is a managerial staff team problem. And whether that gets dealt with at some point, I don't know. I think it falls into the selectmen's court. But if the selectmen are asking the town manager to do something and the town manager's asking his staff to do something and it's not getting done, that's a problem. And I would strongly recommend we not let those problems persist and we address them. So that's all I have to say on that.
So we've had a lot presented to us regarding staffing. Are we ready to come to a decision? Because we need to come to a decision if we're gonna figure out what the budget's gonna be. And if we can't approve the budget tonight, we're going to be meeting many times a week between now and the end of February.
Plenty of time now that the 40B is over, so.
Thanks, Brian. So what do people think about the harbor? The suggestion that the SRO hours in the summer are used to cover the harbor.
That seems very sensible to me.
Yeah. I like that idea. I still think we need to raise more revenue in that area. It's a growth area. We don't spend enough time figuring out the revenue. But I like the SRO idea.
Man, this one, slightly to that. Currently, our transient parking tie-up is, has minimal services. When it's expanded and we have water and electricity, the plan is to increase the fees significantly. I would not suggest that our current mooring fees are, if not the highest on the coast, they are very close.
Mhm.
So we watched that. The transient is relatively new, last couple of years. It'll be watched, and we appreciate your suggestion.
Yes, my suggestion was focused really on the transient. It's considerably lower than other harbors, so the ones that I go to. So in general, my comment is we talk a lot about cost, and there is another side to balance a budget.
Okay, let's not go deep into the.
No, what I was going to suggest is, should someone make a motion?
That's what I was gonna say, I think we need to vote on this.
Yes. For the Board of Selectmen, is there someone who'll make a motion to accept the choice B for the harbor?
So moved.
Motion approved.
Okay, I have a second.
Mhm.
John,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Ann says yes.
Do I have a motion for the finance committee?
I'll make a motion that we propose option B to add a seasonal person with SRO
Okay,
for the harbor.
Second.
Andy will second. Take a roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
Dean?
Yes.
Maury?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Sarah votes yes, and Peter Twining, are you still on?
Yes, I'm still on, I'm a yes.
Okay, Mike, are you on or off? Mike's off.
He
because
had to
he had-
drop off.
He had a 7 o'clock business call. Okay. Now we get down to the police.
I think we haven't talked about this at all.
Okay,
Does anybody have questions about the three choices for the police? I have one, which is under choice E, the 439. Does that recognize that the station can be covered with current staff during weekday day shift?
No, I don't believe so, right, Greg? That was, I think the,
Right, that basically assumed it would take 3 full-time people to provide 7 days a week,
16 hours a day.
days and evenings.
So in fact, this number is somewhat inflated compared with what we're considering for adding a patrol officer. Because we would not be covered, that person would not be covered.
You'd have, this would give guaranteed
Yeah,
coverage, so it's not quite apples to apples.
okay, that's,
So this is 24/7 coverage.
no,
No, it's 18 hours a day coverage.
16.
16 hours.
16,
I did that
7,
last time.
Yeah.
The morning
It's 16
shift
hours.
and the evening
Yeah,
shift,
it's the
not
two
the
shifts.
overnight shift.
So I still don't understand why it's so much larger than 2 police officers at
Well,
439.
You're including that 274 number from option C,
Ah,
because you still have that overtime situation for
Oh, okay.
backfilling.
So it's minus 2.
So it's the 274 from option C plus
It's about 100.
165 or so to do the 3 full-time civilians. So it's a
Even I-
combination of those 2 numbers.
Even I understand it now.
okay.
Question? Just a question on the spreadsheet, the options that you laid out. The column F, savings elsewhere, could you just elaborate where those savings were coming from that are offsetting some of the?
Yeah, those are overtime costs.
That's
savings.
all overtime savings.
Yeah.
So where's the dispatch savings?
That's separate.
So this is based
Just-
on the proposed 24 budget,
Okay,
which did not have the dispatch numbers in it. So those dispatch numbers were already out, taken out of the
which I wanna know where it went.
budget.
So it's just looking at the incremental cost.
Correct.
So does overtime go away with the two new police officers?
Not 100%. No, there's still 93,000 or something like that.
You know, we figured around 93,000, it's about 538 hours per officer. So we figured for 12 people.
Right. I mean, right now, the overtime is what?
We spend about 370 a year. on
All right, so that 370 goes down to under 100.
Yeah.
Okay.
About 93 with a little bit of reserve time built in.
So I have another question. So this is a scenario covering 16 hours a day, correct?
Yep.
Okay. What if we reduce that to 8 hours a day? Because I don't know what's happening 2 years out, 3 years out, as to how things work out. We're kind of seeing how things go as time goes on.
Well, to maintain what we have now, we need 12.4 people, that's what we
Right.
figured out, so 13. So to get to the lobby coverage 24 hours a day, we would need 16. So this is kind of in between, best case scenario that gives you lobby coverage and sometimes the need not to backfill for paid time off.
And isn't this issue not just covering dispatch, but also covering the loss of the reserve?
Loss of the reserves.
Right.
So it's a dual problem.
Yeah, the loss of reserves is the bigger problem,
It's a bigger
quite
problem.
frankly. It rushed ahead, if you will, in the last couple of months.
So I see some flexibility if, right now, the station, the coverage is 16 hours based on this.
Correct.
Now, if it goes to say, maybe we say, oh, we can do this with 12. Well, we're gonna pick up the overtime cost then. The overtime cost would start to go down because those guys would now start to fill in
Correct.
for that,
Yeah,
okay.
so the schedule that I proposed, those two new people are actually, which is something we have to talk to the union about or negotiate it, would be floated.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to what the fire department does. That's what my thought was, and they're not specifically on a 4 and 2. So if we knew someone was on vacation on a different shift, then we could bounce them to that different shift to cover. That was my thinking,
Okay.
trying to think outside the box a little bit.
Becky, did you have any questions on this portion? You're muted.
Thank you, I raised my hand instead. There we go. No, I don't have any questions on that, and happy to make a motion if everybody else is ready.
Brian,
May I?
Brian had a question.
Oh, sorry, Peter.
Okay,
May I ask a question just for clarity?
yep,
So with respect to the civilian coverage, it's 16 hours a day, is that what we're providing with these costs?
Yeah,
Yes.
That was committed, wasn't it? As part
yeah,
of the-
that's what it is right now.
but
I'm
he's
just
asking about
confused
the
about
cost for the
the-
civilian coverage.
How many hours a day are we covering?
You're providing cover,
400.
you're providing station coverage 16 hours a day under this proposal by using patrol officers, not civilians.
But under E, civilian coverage, that's also 16 hours a day. correct?
Yes, that was also 16
Sorry,
hours.
I'm sorry, I was on, okay.
Brian?
Yeah,
did you-
I'm under E. So this is, so we're using civilian and I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you all, but is this using officers or civilians?
D is officers, E is civilians.
Okay, thank you.
If you have the
Thank you.
spreadsheet.
Okay,
Brian?
yeah, I have it. in front of
Okay,
me.
good.
So I just want to clarify, option D, okay, with the 2 patrol officers, that gives flexibility for harbor.
Yeah, so so this schedule that I proposed does not include the SRO, myself, or the lieutenant. So those SRO hours could be designated strictly for the harbor.
And as far as you have the actual resources then to empty the lobby at some point to ride along with the, as an EMT with the ambulance. So it's as I like to call it, a Swiss Army knife approach to staffing for all 3.
Any other questions on this?
Is there a motion to accept, the item D, add to patrol for the, police staff?
Second,
Okay, I'll make the motion.
I think she was looking for a so moved.
so moved, I couldn't.
That's it, that works.
Okay, motion and second. Motion by Ann Harris, second by Becky. John?
Yes.
Brian?
Jay.
Yes.
Ann says yes.
Yes.
Kath and Becky?
Yes,
Do I have a motion from the finance committee?
I move that we accept option D.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Andy seconds. Roll call vote. Andy?
Yes.
Maury?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes,
And Sarah votes yes. Now we move down to fire.
Does that cover the civilian option?
That's D, 2 patrol officers,
Okay, that's,
covering the lobby
right.
and filling all the shifts.
There'll always be a uniformed officer.
Not always, not
Well,
necessarily.
no, but there won't be a civilian in the lobby. is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Fire. I'll make a motion for the finance committee. And I would move that we accept option G, And if we find that the fire department between July of '23 and December of '23 is able to keep its overtime down, then in the fiscal year 2025 budget, we might consider adding another firefighter. That's my motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Dean will second. Any discussion?
Will you repeat them up, please?
Yeah, the motion is, for fire, is item G, to renew the call firefighter by training initially police officers as call firefighters. And if the fire department can demonstrate between July of 2023 and December of 2023 that they can keep their overtime budget in accordance with the overtime expenditure in accordance with what the overtime is budgeted, that when we do the fiscal year 2025, we might consider whether to approve an additional firefighter.
So,
Thank you.
so Sarah, just Mike, to say that a different way, at this point in time for the next fiscal year, that option G, whatever you just, that would not, it would not be any new full-time at this time, correct?
Correct, that's my motion.
Yep, okay.
Just
I'll
make-
second it if it hasn't been seconded.
Okay,
To make the discussion easier, can I get the same motion from the Board of Selectmen?
Okay, yes, we will, the Board of Selectmen will propose the exact same motion G.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now, is there discussion?
any discussion?
So the real challenge becomes if there is that long-term injury,
Yes.
you know, those extenuating circumstances do arise. And in public safety, it's a real challenge. So what are you gonna do about it?
Well, and that's what we'll have to look at in the fiscal year 2025 budget. If they go over, the reason why they go over.
I might say, Chief, in this situation, what this does is this is perhaps a conflict with regard to what your philosophy is for a fully staffed station, which I know in general is 4 people. And you've been working with 3. Now, to keep this overtime managed, you're almost forced to go down to 2 in many instances. Is that correct here?
I would be, yes.
Okay, I just want to know where I think there's a philosophical issue that's involved here. You'd like 4, you've been living with 3. 2 is difficult, but that's what this,
2 is unsafe.
2 is what this proposal is essentially saying. In many instances, you're going to have to deal with.
Well, because you've got the call firefighters to back you.
Yeah, you do. You do have the call firefighters now, but in the station,
If that's
We don't have them yet.
it's 2 guys.
Right, and that limits our ability to go mutual aid.
Understood.
And it requires us to call mutual aid sooner.
Okay.
So,
Kathy?
So I would,
Yep.
One.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
just a question.
Limit,
Just a question.
Hold on, Mike.
So,
okay.
so Chief, you had sent us a spreadsheet back in, I think it was September.
Mhm.
You asked for some benchmarking. Different towns and what their personnel makeup
yes,
was, and not really helping your case. And that's what I'm struggling with personally, okay?
Essex County is what Essex County is, and that's why I
So-
presented last week,
Give it to
the last
Cape
meeting,
Ann.
the same thing. Everybody does it differently.
So what I'm struggling with is, number one, so the motions that are is in front of us has to do with call firefighters, right? My concern is we have, all of the neighboring towns seem to rely on call firefighters.
Sarah, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but there's a lot of background noise and I
Ryan.
can't hear Kathy.
Yeah, thank you.
So, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes, there was just some background noise and I couldn't,
Okay,
he couldn't hear you.
all right, thank you. So my
It's not
question,
Ann and Brian.
my question is, these other towns seem to have built a culture that is supportive of call firefighters. and they seem to be successful. What are they doing that we couldn't?
I don't know that it's that readily identifiable. I think part of it has to do with the size of the communities and the people's willingness to volunteer. As Greg pointed out, communities that have no full-time firefighters, if nobody comes, then nobody comes. You know we're coming because we're in the station. If you're on a volunteer or a call department and your pager goes off, you don't know who's showing up or who's not. So the onus is on you to be more dedicated to that in order to guarantee people will show up.
So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm just looking at, Wenham, said here, had 3 full-timers and 30 call. Topsfield, 7 full-timers, 19 call. We currently are budgeted for 15, it says 15 full-time, 12 currently. I wasn't sure actually how many humans we actually have.
We have 14 right now.
We have 14 humans, budget for 15 humans?
Yes.
Okay. It just feels like, I'm a little bit concerned, I understand why the finance committee and the select board want to not throw more bodies, or hire more people for that department. I am concerned though that we may not have the culture or the recipe for a successful call force.
But I think it's
And
different if it's police. Those are town employees.
Right.
So the
Well, so that's
higher
what I wanted to-
chance of responding
I don't
is.
disagree with that, but I wanted to emphasize the fact some things are not about the money and the culture. It doesn't feel like we have the right culture here, and I'm hopeful that if we go down this road, that both chiefs can work together to make sure that culture is successful with Greg. It seems to be, there's something else there that we're not talking about, and I don't know what it is.
Okay, Mike, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just 2 quick things, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but our ability to provide mutual aid is different ambulance versus an engine, right? Ambulance would be 2, engines 3.
Correct.
And I also believe the data shows that we provide much more mutual aid with the ambulance than an engine, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to point that out.
Yep.
And then, just to follow up on Kathy's point that she just said, I agree. And I just think that, part of the solution is we could insert whatever word you want, promotion, marketing, encouragement, whatever word is best to describe, but, I've driven through Hamilton and right by the fire station, there's a, big LED sign, call firefighters, call this number, email this, right? So it's just, right on 1A. I mean, I think that's part of the issue.
Thank you, Mike. Becky?
I completely agree with that, and I think that, in order to make this succeed, we definitely will have to modify how we encourage call firefighting. But I think Kathy really hit that one directly. Thank you.
Brian?
To those points, we used to have the culture, okay? I don't know if it's a matter of encouraging or did we discourage, okay? I lived on Central Street for a long time, and I remember those pickup trucks with the red lights shooting, okay? And I look at 2 other towns on Cape Ann. Let's not look at the North Shore or Essex County. Let's look at Cape Ann. And the other 2 towns of comparable size, and one's even larger population and area-wise, and they're full call, and they seem to get it done. All right. So I think that rather than say, I think yes, we have to re-engage, okay. But I think there is a culture here of wanting to serve. Okay, we've seen it. It was successful. I've been in town for 25 years, and I was shocked when I finally got engaged here to realize that we didn't have much of a call anymore.
And
I'd like to clarify that, the motion that's in front of the select board is there because I wanted to have one discussion
Mhm.
rather than, but I personally am concerned that if we go with no additional firefighters and hope that we will get call firefighters and hope that they will get trained and hope that they will show up, I think we're putting our fire department in a very hard place.
Are you amending your motion?
I am arguing against the motion that we made, yes.
Dean?
Well, I wanted to, there are two other considerations, and one is we just hired 3 firefighters, and they're not completely trained yet. I would like to see them integrated more into the system before we did more. Also,
So Dean, just to be clear, those aren't new, those are replacements.
No, well.
well, the
it's
2
new
and the
positions.
1 additional, right? There was 3? There were 2 replacements?
2 are replacements and 1 is the new
New floater.
Right.
floater.
And the big key is one of the replacements is the guy, is what was causing all the overtime problems with the, he was out on
No, he
extended
was one of the
leave.
full-timers that left, so it was still covering him, yes.
So anyway, that is why and also the uncertainty with the dispatch and how that's gonna change things. We don't know. We don't think it will, but it would be nice to get a little time under our belt with the new system before we reevaluate the needs. I don't see our fire department services decreasing at all, and our mandate for the budget this year is to maintain existing. So those are some of my justifications for supporting why it's.
Ryan?
To Ann's point, and is that I do have some concerns. You know, I might be willing to support, do a compromise and support line item H, which gives us 1, with also the mandate of increasing the call.
I think taking out all funding for call firefighters would be a mistake. And there, as Brian said, there isn't a line that says, okay, spend some money trying to recruit, have money to try and recruit call firefighters in the way that you just suggested, using public employees as our pool.
And
But
there is a
also-
motion that's been seconded.
The
From
motion
the
has been
select board.
seconded and we are having a discussion.
I just mean when Brian, if he's talking about
But I'm just,
a different, that would be a different motion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
we still have to vote on the first motion, though.
We would have to, yeah.
So, if I could comment.
Mhm.
I understand the frustration over the management of overtime. I would caution us to use that as a reason to not move forward with a logical plan. I would much prefer a plan that allowed us to provide the staffing as we try to regrow the call force.
Then you need to give us a different number, because you're assuming overtime is gonna be reduced, and I'm not convinced it will be.
And I'm telling you, stick with that number and force us to live within that overtime. That's, to me, that would be a better way to go and provide an assurance that we have success.
I don't see it, I mean,
I don't see how we have success. It's gonna take at least a year to get the call force
yeah,
reconstituted.
I have a
but what
question.
you're saying, Greg, part of my concern is the last 3 people we've hired are paramedics. They're not trained to fight fires. So we've got a lag on getting to be able to fight fires. We had unusual circumstances over the past year or so regarding health issues. And so I don't see it, with those additional floaters, that should have covered a lot of the issues if we hadn't had all those other problems. That's where I'm coming from.
No, I understand, but we had those other problems.
Right,
So, may I ask a question? First of all, apologies for my ignorance, is there a mandatory retirement age for the fire department?
65.
Okay. Given that, do we have some anticipated retirements coming up, given that
3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years out? Okay, because I think when we're talking long-term, we want to think about who's coming in and who may be retiring up. I just ask that we, as we contemplate this, we think about how long it's going to take to rebuild the call firefight. I think I'm hearing we're all in favor of rebuilding that. And the question I think we're asking is, do we need to supplement that approach with an additional full-time hire while we build up the call? So that's what I'm thinking we're contemplating, I think we're all in favor of beefing up call, building that back up, but the question is, do we need option H in the interim? And with people potentially retiring in, 3 to 5 years, what do the long-term financials look like? So anyway.
Well, as using DPW as an example from last year, I think it was, they anticipated, I think, 2 critical retirements happening, and so they proposed a plan of, before those retirements happening, increasing the budgets if they could make some hires, do some cross-training, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, because the other concern that we haven't talked about yet is the succession issue, right? We have a gap in the
Leadership.
yeah, there's a leadership gap. There's no way for someone to work their way up the ladder and stay employed by the town of Manchester. So I don't know if we can solve this tonight, but I'd like us to think about that if we consider adding a full-time FTE. Should we think about, does it have to be an entry-level firefighter? Would it make sense to fill that leadership gap with an FTE and get the chief some help in figuring all this out? Just a thought, but I feel like we're talking about one subject and forgetting another big gap when it comes to staffing.
Yes, Andy?
I have a question for you, Greg. So I think for at least the last 3 years, we've been talking about this very plan each year, and so in the last couple of years, we've kind of, the result of the discussion was to add a floater in each of those years, but we held back from the full 4x4 staffing model. So in your eyes, what's changed this year versus those last couple of years? Because I just don't recall you advocating as fully voiced as you are this year.
So I made the assumption when we started down the floater route that we would have at least a handful of calls continuing on. So that's a change there. And I think the other hard knocks experience tells us that it's probably more normal to have someone out injured or someone leaving and having trouble filling the spot or whatever, that it's even with the staffing on paper, in practice, you don't have that. And it costs you a lot of money because of public safety needs. And so I've come to believe that you need some extra staffing just to cover those what-if scenarios when people get injured or someone retires and it takes 6 months to fill the slot or whatever. So it's a combination of those factors.
And do you see a strategy, as we just talked about it and talked about it prior, about this notion of having some potential second in command? Is there sort of a strategy to make that happen? Do you see that as viable with the numbers we have, or even if we add a person? how do we get there?
So my struggle with that, and the chief and I've had a few conversations, if you do the typical model where it's a Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, typical 8-hour workday, that doesn't help your staffing for emergencies. It's administrative. And I would much rather focus first on call response than administrative.
Does that kind of second in command function really have to include the administrative aspect? What are the other components that make that person a logical choice to step into the chief's role as a succession plan?
So it's that administrative piece
Yeah,
that they lack.
I can speak to that. So it's learning the chief's job by being involved in the administrative duties when the chief's there on a daily basis. To go some of the same meetings, or to go to meetings that the chief can't be in 2 places at the same time. To be in charge of the department in a command function when the chief's away on vacation, at a conference. And they would be firefighter paramedics. They would have emergency response responsibilities the same way I do. So right now, after hours, I'm on call 24/7. The call came into Essex, we went mutual aid, I went to mutual aid to support their command staff over there. So I wouldn't have to be 24/7, I could be on call after hours this week, the deputy chief is on call after hours next week, or I know I'm gonna be away this weekend, can you cover the calls? He would also be responding to daytime calls as well as I do on certain types of calls that require my response during the day. But it's to learn the administrative functions, having already served as a company officer and helping to manage the day-to-day stuff. In addition, that role would be primarily responsible for the fire prevention, for dealing with permits, for getting them online, for doing the inspections, for doing the annual business inspections, because the Monday through Friday, with one person in charge of it, creates the consistency. There's the one face of prevention. He can train up the other people underneath him. He's out meeting the business owners. He can do follow-ups. Previously, that was done by a shift officer who only works 2 days out of every 8. And that inconsistency makes it, plus if he's there during the day, he's helping to do public education in the schools.
Sorry, sir, go ahead.
Greg, in the past, haven't we had success with bringing in interim fire chiefs to go between the various chiefs?
Yes.
So that's been the process we
So
followed
we
instead
typically
of.
have hired from outside to get the chief position. That's been the tradition.
Yeah.
We haven't promoted from within typically.
As I see it, the benefit of having that in-house person is then you have somebody that's already familiar with us and the position, and it's.
But is it that much different between various towns?
Well, the last chief didn't last very long.
Well, he was interim.
No, I mean the one before, Grimlinger.
Oh, okay.
Greg, I'm sort of wrestling here a little bit, like, I think you were sort of recommending option I originally.
I recommend option I.
And yet, I think
with an
there's,
aggressive push to a new model.
that's the key. And I guess
I
how
don't-
does
I
that,
don't do option I with the hope of going to 22, and the chief and I disagree on this, but I don't believe that that's a viable model for us. I just feel that the cost outweigh the benefits of that model. I do feel we have a problem right now, and it's cost effective to go ahead and hire the 2, hold that OT line to the T, come hell or high water. And pursue aggressively new models, talking to our neighbors and figuring out the long-term solution, which I believe is a regional model. I think that's where we have to go. And to me, it's a package deal.
Yep.
You know, your concession would be to go with I,
Right.
hire 2 people. That's a leap of faith on your part, and I get that. That's a big expenditure. And then our side of the bargain is that we've got to bring to you viable solutions on a regional basis. That's how I feel. That's where I'm coming down on
Can I
this.
ask a question?
Go ahead,
Greg,
Tom.
you said aggressively hold to the overtime budget. Is that what you just said?
Right.
how is that done? How do we do that? Because those are unforeseen circumstances like what.
Well, because with 4 on every crew, it's easy to drop down to 3. On occasion, if you have to drop down to 2. But the chances of that are pretty slim when you've got 16.
A little follow-up to that too. What happened last year with all of the unforeseen circumstances, is that typical? Is it something that,
Unfortunately, it has been typical, but if you have 16, it's much easier to keep at 3 without spending overtime. That's the difference.
so we're talking about a net cost of 80 grand, is that what you said?
Yes.
Another question. If we go with the 2 and we build up a robust call,
Yes.
okay, is there an option to take one of these new hires or anyone and create a pseudo deputy position?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
so.
if
and
that,
then
if that call
that
force
becomes-
becomes robust again,
Mhm.
then absolutely, you
So
can
then
peel one off.
If we go that route, and then there's, the chief is then, in his best interest to really, as the entire town, is to build up that call force, and then create the command structure that he's looking for.
Right.
Without that robust, he doesn't have a command structure.
Question? So if we went with option I, but to Brian's point, we really wanted to focus one of those hires on filling the succession gap, does the money here still make sense? We've discussed some things here that may not be a neat fit into FGH.
Right.
So I'm wondering, do you need,
Aren't we talking ING? If we're gonna build a robust,
well, so I was
think
asking
I think
about
G's
the,
a little heavy. I don't think you're gonna have 5 people going to the academy in year 1. So I don't think you need that much money.
would you need to, would row I need to be different if we wanted to target one of those positions for the succession? Chief is shaking his head over here.
Well, in years 2 or 3, I don't think you need to do it in year 1. Because I don't think you hire the person as a deputy from the get-go. I think you have the position, but if
We have to build the call force.
if the call builds and you're successful at that, and then you want to move to one of the positions being boosted to a deputy, then that's when you add money in years 2 or
So
3.
you have enough money in these options here to do what we were trying to,
We would need a little bit more, we would need to take some of G and add it to I.
okay.
and how much would that be?
I would be comfortable at a 30,000 level, where I would cut that number in half, basically. And if you had one person who's already trained and 2 more going to the academy, I think that'd be a successful year.
We have a motion on the table.
Right.
Are we ready to vote on that motion?
Someone remind
The
me
motion-
exactly
The
what it
motion
was.
is
G.
G.
And if the fire chief is able to hold the overtime between July of '23 and December of '23, to then relook at adding firefighters in the fiscal year 2025 budget. In other words, to hold the feet to the fire for a while and in the meantime, be trying to build up the call firefighters.
Question.
Yes,
But
Mark?
I have a question, but I hope I'm not taking it right back. If we add 2 more firefighters, and let's say this call effort succeeds wildly, and 3 or 4 years from now, we decide to peel career people back by 2, can we do that?
Yeah, through
So this is-
attrition.
This is a one-way street, okay.
Through attrition,
All right.
retirement and attrition, one way or the other. I don't see that as problematic.
Thank you for indulging.
Are we ready? Is the select board ready to vote on?
What is the motion?
The motion is
G, right?
G with the provision that if the overtime is cut back.
Is held to the
is
budget.
held to the
Right,
budget.
right, but it's adding no one.
Adding no one and
Until fiscal year
fiscal
2025.
Right.
Can I vote no?
Becky,
When,
John,
no,
No,
Kathy?
No.
No.
Vote of the FinCom. Tom,
No.
Dean,
yes.
Maury,
No.
Andy,
Yes.
Peter. Mike?
I don't think Mike's with us. Oh, yeah, yes.
Mike, are you there? Peter, are you there?
He is there.
Who is?
Mike's there, but he's muted.
Is Peter there?
And I don't see Peter anymore.
Sarah, can you do that count one more time for me?
No, they're not done yet.
Yeah, I know, when you're done. Thanks.
1, 2, 3.
Five.
You've got 5.
You're fine.
What? What did you vote, Maury? No. And Tom voted no. What'd you vote, Dean?
Yes.
So there were 3 yeses and 2 nos.
So it fails.
No, passes. Majority.
it's majority present or majority.
Well, that's
That's
the
the
question.
definition.
We just need to have,
There's 2 schools of thought on that.
I understand.
There are 2 schools of thought.
Mike Pratt, are you there?
Peter left us too.
Hi, I'm here, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say his name's still there.
So
Yep.
we were taking a
I did.
vote. Did you hear the vote?
Yep,
And how do you vote?
this is the motion that you made, right?
This is the motion that we do G, and if overtime is kept in line with the budget for the second half of 2023 in fiscal year 2025, we consider adding full-time firefighters.
Right, so in other words, not adding any new car, for the next one, right?
For 2024, correct?
Yep, so I vote yes.
Okay.
May I make a motion to approve option I with the addition of $30,000 for, if needed, for call firefighter training?
Is there a second?
Second.
Are we ready for a vote?
I have one question on that. Looking at I, eliminates most overtime. Most is kind of a qualitative term.
Right, so we left 20,000 in overtime. So the original budget had 140, and this took out 120.
With 2 extra folks, can we get that to 0?
Well, so, 4th of July,
Well, there's no fireworks this
a
year.
winter storm when you want to have all hands on deck, things like that happen.
I think the firefighters look for a little overtime too. Supplement.
Well, there's that
Yeah.
stimulus, I guess. Okay, just inquiring. I just don't know what most is.
Right, so no, I understand. So it's,
So,
I think the question is, are you guaranteed to stay at that?
that was gonna be my question.
so that's, that's, to me, that's part of
That's
the.
the elephant in the room, right?
Right, so that's, we need to ensure that that's the case.
So, on the prior motion, Sarah had a qualification about holding to demonstrating the ability to meet the overtime budget, right? Would we consider adding that qualification as a friendly amendment to Becky's motion so
I
that
would
we could
accept
demonstrate progress on building back the call firefighters.
Yeah.
Before we go out and actually hire some, or say, I mean, is there a way to,
Carrot and stick.
yeah. Not quite sure how to phrase it.
I think we could phrase it, and I would happily accept a friendly amendment to, that we won't be paying overtime. I think we can leave it at that.
I
Can
think,
I?
But $20,000 is out there.
Can I ask a question from an operational point of view? If overtime is at 0 or capped at 20, does that mean we'll run lower than 3, we'll run to 2, we'll run down to 1?
If you
On
have
shift.
to, you're being given 2 more people, so yes, chief, that's what that means.
Okay, I just wanted a clarification.
Well, I'd propose an amendment for $20,000 max. Is the overtime number.
So that's what I had. That's the number
Okay,
that's in
all right.
the budget.
Where does this $30,000 come from?
The friendly amendment, Kathy, would you phrase that again, please?
Well, so I was thinking of, and I don't have good phrasing, I apologize, my brain's not working right now, but I was trying to think of a way of what progress would we want to see demonstrated towards building back the call firefighter structure before we actually go hire two new firefighters. And I don't have enough experience to articulate what the
I have a problem.
what the demonstrated progress would be.
To
Yeah,
that
I
point,
don't think, I would not accept that as
no,
a friendly
I
amendment.
would, we have, if we're gonna make a commitment to hiring and increasing public safety, then we have to make the commitment.
Okay.
Right? And then,
could we consider, and this is in discussion and not direct, could we consider hiring one new firefighter with the idea that we will hire another if the chief is able to keep the overtime to the budget?
Well, I don't think it's, so if you don't have 2, then I go back to the number in age. So if you don't bring on 2, it's gonna be harder, you can't keep the 20 if you don't bring on 2.
let's do 2.
So it would not be fair to have 20 as the benchmark if you're only hiring 1 new.
But I assume when you hire one new, you're reducing, yeah, you keep.
I cut it in half.
60,000.
So instead of 140,
This is
you
that.
drop 60, there's
we
be
would-
80.
If we took on H, then that's got the 60,000 additional, or 60,000 for overtime.
80,
80?
the 20 plus the 60.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. We have, but the motion on the floor at the moment
Is I.
is aye.
I
And
plus
we-
30?
I plus 30.
I plus 30 is the motion,
Okay.
correct.
I'd encourage you to stick with that if you're gonna
Yeah.
do something.
But
Can
if
we-
we feel that we want to
I'm
hold,
sorry.
have something to say,
Yeah, I think you could say, and you instruct the town administrator and the chief to come up with definitive benchmarks to show progress towards reconstituting the call force.
I'm less worried about that than sticking to the overtime.
And you will not exceed the budgeted overtime.
So we
I
stop,
would
the
accept
faucet
those
stops.
2 as friendly amendments, if somebody wants to make those.
What happens if they exceed the overtime?
Yeah, we don't have, we have the threat, but we don't have any, with I, we've got, he's got,
No sticking teeth.
Every year you set the budget.
They ask for they have to get approval to take money to pay overtime. and that cannot be approved.
But Becky, they've already spent it.
Right, they've already worked the hours.
That's the problem.
That's the-
Right, and I'm saying part of what we're agreeing tonight,
Right.
on this side of the table, if you will, is that we don't do that.
May I ask one more question? How do you expect to come in on budget for this fiscal year on the overtime?
Yeah, I'm scrambling to figure that out.
I'm sorry, maybe I should have directed that towards the chief, but
That's
So
not,
I think we're going down to 2 for the next 5 months.
so we're going to take action
Yes.
so that we're not 200, whatever, $1,000, okay.
And that would be expected to happen in the next fiscal year too. If we
Correct.
exceed that 20, I think you said over. Well, that's it then, right? I mean, that's the teeth, we're not gonna go there.
Okay, Becky, would you restate your motion, just to make sure we're all clear on exactly what you've asked for?
Yep, my motion was to go with option I, add 2 new firefighters as well as 30,000 for call training.
Call force development.
Yes.
Okay, is the select board ready to vote on this?
Yes.
But I thought that was seconded.
You seconded
I
it.
seconded, yes.
Brian seconded it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I will
there was no-
accept, and I will accept a friendly amendment if somebody wants to make one concerning overtime and benchmarks on call firefighter renewal.
I'd certainly make an amendment on the overtime, which I think we had said was $20,000, I think,
Mhm.
yes, I would add that.
Okay. I don't know what that
In
is.
other words,
Can you-
cap the overtime at $20,000
I
with
think that's
with the
already
2
done.
extra. I don't see that necessarily in the numbers here.
Well, it is by default, because what's in the budget now is 140 and it's showing 120 in savings,
Right.
so that leaves 20.
Okay, that's a net number,
That's-
that's a net number, okay,
So, I think that's clear,
all right, fine.
having debated it for 20 minutes.
Excuse me, I have the additional information that Greg proposed, that the town administrator and chief would make progress on the call force. He added that as a friendly amendment,
We'll put that back to the select board in 6 months.
proposed it.
Does anybody want to add that as a friendly amendment?
Yes, with the requirement that the
OT.
town administrator report back on progress in 6 months, in December of 2023.
Friendly amendment accepted. Brian?
Yes.
you're seconding the friendly.
Second.
The second.
Second.
I already seconded it once.
Okay. Becky,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
and I vote yes. I vote yes. So
Now what?
now, someone, we have 2 different approaches to the fire department budget of staffing. Where do we go from here?
Well, so there's, it's $110 swing. So the finance committee puts the
Not
finance book
110.
together, and that's a recommendation, and
It's 40,000 odd difference. 110
oh,
versus
that's true, I'm
67.5.
just taking the difference between, you're right,
Yeah.
I was going from the base.
Good. 67.
Yeah, it's a smaller swing than that. I overstated this one.
Question?
But in any case, there's two, there'll be a recommendation from the finance committee, a recommendation from the select board, and both will be debated at town meeting, and voters decide.
Just a question, same question I had on the other topics. Is there any way to generate revenue through permits or whatever to help close the gap? I understand it's small, if you hire 2 new people, can they be doing inspections? Is there anything meaningful there? I don't know, that's what I'm asking.
You
Or
could,
raise
you
fees
could
or-
impose inspection fees for every residence 10 years after they've installed their CO2 and smoke detectors, and maybe more frequently for residents that had smoke detectors and CO2 detectors installed before the 10-year cycle went in effect. Somebody should have records on the inspections that have been done. Certainly you could start with houses that have never been inspected. I mean, that would help our safety.
So I think, rather than take up a lot of meeting time, if the chief and I sat down and reviewed current fees and opportunities, that we could come back with some recommendations.
If you could take that action, I'm gonna keep reinforcing, it's more than one side to the balancing act here.
I would just hope that the hunt for revenue doesn't trigger an overtime expenditure.
Yes, absolutely.
It happened all of a sudden, as the clerk's officer.
100%.
Fair enough, Lauren, fair enough.
So we're ready to move on to public safety operating budgets. You want us to switch the order and do equipment, and you guys not be here for the public safety operating budget?
Sounds good to me.
We'll just use the- Okay, we want to move to public safety capital. 186. 186. Is the 2024. Now, there's been some proposed changes to this, is that correct?
So the one definitive, easily accepted change, I think from your perspective, is deleting the police live scan fingerprinting equipment. So that's a $22,000 item.
Why are we deleting it?
And
I was able to secure it free through the state.
Great. Okay. Is this fire turnout gear accurate? Is there potential for more if you're hiring 2 more people?
So that was part of that 30,000.
Okay. Police tasers are still in, that's a lease, right? Yep. Police admin cars. Now, these weren't in the 5-year projection last year.
No, they weren't. We anticipated trying to replace another cruiser. However, that cruiser's got low miles on it, so these are the 2 oldest ones that we can replace. And with the National Grid program, we were able to hopefully get 2 electric vehicles that will get reimbursed for some of the cost of that from National Grid.
So the 88,000 doesn't include that reimbursement, that would be after the fact.
After the fact. So I believe that, after talking to Andrew, the town has to pay the upfront costs and then get reimbursed.
Do we know what that reimbursement is approximately?
So, so the total cost for the cars, which is upfitted, is $103, and then after, it's about $15,000, $7,500 per vehicle.
Is that the federal EV credit or just something
I
separate?
believe it is,
Yeah, that's the federal EV credit.
No, it may be different because that's for rent people.
No, I think you apply through National Grid online, I think it's the same thing.
Okay. 'Cause that was the.
Rather than from the manufacturer.
Yes, but the cost ceiling is what, 55K per vehicle or something like that?
I think so, yeah.
Now, what's going on with the fire apparatus? There was a proposal made. Which I don't understand at all.
Can we just vote on the, no, we can't vote on public safety because there's,
It's one line item.
right.
So one of the things we talked about is if an ambulance isn't going to be purchased in fiscal year 2024, it would make sense to have that $450,000, a warrant article to return it back to the fire engine fund.
You can, that's one option, or it can stay there as for the purchase of a new ambulance when the current ambulance, 2-year lead time, is ready to be ordered.
I'd rather have it go back into the fire engine fund, so we can keep track of it more easily.
Either way.
Yeah. Just keep it clean.
Yeah.
We can,
Yeah, if the voter's 2 years out, we'll understand the chain if it goes back.
Right.
And it gets re-voted in, and it might not be 400, it might be 375 or something like that.
Or
Like-
Prices of the ambulances, prices of the ambulances are coming down now, aren't they?
Yeah.
So the only caveat is perhaps 5,000 or so gets used to modify the engine so that it can be a non-transport medical response vehicle.
I was very confused by this recommendation we received. It's talking way too many vehicles that I don't have a clue what vehicles we have, and this is saying sell ambulance 2. Now, my understanding, it was costing about $23,000 to replace the engine.
Yeah, additional
Correct.
costs too, right?
Was that?
There are additional costs to that as well, aren't there?
Yes, there's $70,000 for the stretcher and the stretcher loading system.
Why do you need the stretcher loading system if you don't
Because
have
it's a-
one in it today?
It's a 12-year-old stretcher. It is not up to state standards, and the new state standard is requiring the striker power load system to prevent back injuries. That's becoming a standard state requirement for state inspection and licensure of ambulances.
Now, last time we got one of those, it was via a grant. Can we not get a grant again?
We would have to apply for a grant again. That's no guarantee that we're going to get it, but in order for it to be a functioning ambulance, it would need to have that stretcher system in it.
But
It
the
really
rec-
doesn't serve function as any type of vehicle without it being a transport vehicle if you're going that route.
But the recommendation in front of us is to not go that route and sell ambulance 2 instead.
Correct, as the board had previously decided to do when I put it out for bid this past year.
And then sell squad 3?
Yes,
And what's ladder 2?
Ladder 2 is our aerial ladder.
It's the only one we have.
Yes, the only aerial ladder we have.
They were going only on even numbers when they were.
Yeah.
We don't use primary numbers when it comes to.
So you're proposing to sell that?
Yes,
Presumably anything sold would go into the fire engine fund. But so, what is being, and you're talking about retrofitting engine 1?
yes, that's the money that Greg was talking about, to put the cabinet in there, to put our ALS equipment onto engine 1 as a class 5 non-transporting ambulance, so when it responds to medical aids, when the ambulance is out of town, we can provide paramedic level care,
How much is that?
5.
probably about $5,000. It's
Um,
primarily for cabinetry.
What other equipment do we have in the fire department?
We have our current ambulance 1,
Okay,
we have car 1, which is my command vehicle. We have engine 1. And we have utility 4, which is a pickup truck that is the brush truck during the brush fire season.
In the ladder truck.
no, he's selling that.
And currently, our engine 1 is out of service, having the pump fixed because it froze and malfunctioned during the fire in Essex. So we're currently borrowing an engine from Linfield to run in town.
So there would be no capital item for equipment in the fiscal year 2024 budget?
No, he's asking for,
1.5 million for a new ladder truck.
In the fiscal year 2024 budget?
Yes, because we would be without a ladder truck, which would render us without a second frontline response piece,
So why are we selling Squad 3?
because that doesn't qualify as a frontline response piece. That's why we're running Linfield's engine. It's too small a vehicle, has too little hose and too little water to be a frontline engine. It was not a suitable replacement for the engine that was sold when that was purchased.
And ladder truck can't be repaired?
Well, we've sent it down to Power Products twice. It still is unable to pass state inspection and get a valid state inspection sticker because of emissions. I sent all the inspection reports to Power Products, who is dealing directly with Detroit Diesel with respect to the motor. But they can't, they already replaced all the injectors, and it had a worse inspection than it did than before it had that work done.
Can't they replace the engine for less than 1.5 million?
They can, but the ladder truck is already beyond its recommended use. It's a 20-year piece. It's at 23 years right now, or 22 years, and it was slated to be replaced in 26 in the long-term planning anyway. And it's not just because of the motor, it's because when the ladder gets that old, other parts of it are affected, like the aerial ladder, the struts.
So what structures in the town of Manchester would require the use of ladder 1?
Anything on School Street, Town Hall,
Like what height, I guess, or?
anything above 24 feet would require a ladder truck.
I have a question. How long has it been, it's been out of service now for a while, right?
Yes.
How long have you taken it out of service now?
It's been out about 6 months off and on since it first failed inspection, I believe. 6 or 8 months.
And now, and then if we sell it and replace it, we're gonna go another 2 to 4 years without a ladder truck.
If we order a new one, correct. Unless we either find a demonstrator model or somebody that has a stock already built ladder truck on the lot.
But doesn't the ladder truck have to be a certain size in order to fit into our house?
No, we have plenty of room for the aerial ladder in our station.
I guess my question.
Last time we had to buy a custom one to fit, didn't we?
We built an old-
23 years ago now.
that was before my time. I
I
don't-
guess.
I was on the finance
Ipswich
committee at
Ipswich
the
had a
time.
problem about 15 years ago. Didn't they buy a truck that was too big for the fire station?
There are several departments that have done that.
I guess my question is, I'm gonna liken this to a pair of pants you find in the back of the closet. If we've gone this long without a ladder truck, and now you're proposing to go almost 3 years without a ladder truck, can we get by without it, just use, as Greg points out, mutual aid for those occurrences? We had, what, I think you said last time, 10 working fires that we had to respond to here in town? And at that point, I asked, when was the ladder truck required in any of these 10? And you didn't have those answers back then.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, $1.5 million for something that we rarely use seems like a big ask.
Well, understandable. I mean, this is the issue. We can rely on mutual aid if it's available. It has the capability of serving as a frontline pumper because it has a pump on it when our engine goes out of service, where the squad currently cannot serve in that function. So it has a dual role. Instead of having engine one, a spare engine, and a ladder, the ladder would take the place of needing a spare engine. Should something happen to engine one like currently?
Why can't we just get another regular engine instead of a ladder truck?
We could. A mutual aid does rely on us. Our ladder truck is part of the response to several different communities for multiple alarm fires.
I guess I don't feel that Manchester, being the size it is, should have special equipment in order to respond to mutual aid.
Well, it's
That's
not
my
primarily. I'm just mentioning that as one of our responsibilities. We go to Gloucester, sort of second alarm with a ladder truck, and we respond our ladder truck to Essex when they respond to the school as part of a joint response. So our response to them is the ladder truck. That's why one of the methods I hear, if you look under number 2D, Essex had the pump fail on their ladder truck, and they will be in a market in the near future for needing a new ladder truck also. So with the thought of regionalization and our working relationship with Essex, it might make sense for both towns to go in to jointly purchase a ladder truck and then work out the response, automatic response from whoever ends up with the ladder truck responding to the other community. And that spreads the burden out and doesn't put the financial burden on any one community, but both communities get the benefit. So that's why I put that in there as a potential option. As we look towards potential future regionalization, now going to regional dispatch and other discussions we've had regarding Essex.
So does it, I think on this select board, the last select board discussion, we discussed, kind of a public safety strategy. Would it make sense to kind of go forward with that strategy discussion before we take on a really large expense? Especially if that discussion may lead to some increased regional cooperation.
The challenge with that is, as you all joked about earlier, these trucks aren't getting any cheaper.
Right.
They're not showing up any quicker. And we're in the position now where we had to go borrow an engine because we don't have a sufficient backup piece of apparatus, which leaves us very strapped.
How's that being paid for?
There is no cost.
Oh.
I mean, there's a cost for replacing the engine, which comes out of the vehicle maintenance fund, but there is no cost to borrow the engine. That's part of the mutual aid agreements we have. Peabody had just borrowed it and had just been back in Linfield the day before we borrowed it.
Did they fill up the tank?
Sorry. So I just have, remembering so bad, the current ladder 2 that we're gonna sell,
Yes.
Is that aerial ladder, the only ladder truck we have?
okay,
That's the big truck.
right, but we wanna buy a new one to replace that one. I guess what I'm saying is it functioning, ladder 2? And could we postpone selling it so we have something until we do the strategy?
It functions, but it can't legally drive on the road, so it's not in service.
Okay, so it doesn't function.
Can we get a pass
Can't
from
drive it, okay.
Chief Fitzgerald?
Yeah, but I've got a question. It doesn't function as a ladder truck. It can't function as any truck because it's a pumper. It can pump.
It does both.
But
Okay,
can't drive
that's
on the
correct,
road.
but either you drive it or you don't drive it. You
We're
can't
not
drive it
driving
and
it
say,
at
I'm
all.
not using a ladder.
No, it's
You
out of
just-
service.
You can't drive it at all.
No,
I propose.
I gotta believe Essex
GoFundMe
is having the
page,
same
I'll put the
discussion
first
we are
$35
with a ladder
something
truck.
to cover the
they
first.
only bought their ladder truck with a pump. They didn't buy that intentionally. It was the one available to them. They really only wanted the ladder. But the one they found actually had a pump, so they bought it as a package deal, but that's not how they spec that truck.
The real estate isn't that much different from ours. I mean, they don't, you know, that they would have the same, I think, philosophy with regard to how often do you use a ladder truck for fires.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Can I, it just, it seems as if the possibility of doing a regional buy is a very good idea. And fits with our general philosophy. But I don't see being able to come up with an agreement with Essex between now and town meeting. So, I suggest that we postpone buying another ladder, or contracting to buy another ladder truck until after we've had that discussion.
Stands to reason.
And I just, again, a common sense approach, and I'm sorry, this is probably wrong in so many ways, but that hasn't stopped me in the past, is why, let's put that ladder back into service. I mean, it's right now, it would pass in 48 other states, or maybe not California, okay?
Yep.
And we're adamant about public safety here.
Yep.
Okay? So the firefighters, to the best of our knowledge, are not at risk in riding in the cab. This is a missions thing for the, here in Massachusetts. I just feel that until we figure out what we're gonna do, and if we are behind the 8 ball as far as equipment goes, and that acts as a pumper, okay, then it just makes, to me, a common sense approach is, go really, make sure that we just drive it sparingly, but still drive, but make it available.
I understand that. There's gonna be two issues with that. I can't in good conscience put a vehicle that's not supposed to be legal on the road. And you'd likely need to deal with the firefighters that would not want to be put in a position of having a potential liability were that vehicle to get in an accident, showing that it has a rejection sticker on the window. The legal ramifications if they're involved in an accident, and maybe Chief Fitzgerald could speak to that, I'm not up on my chapter 90 bars. But if that vehicle got in an accident and they got sued, that's gonna be the first picture that they're gonna show in the courtroom was, this truck wasn't even supposed to be legally driving on the road because it won't pass inspection.
Okay, let's get back to the
And I
budget.
want to avoid any litigation in that respect.
Let's get back to the budget. Are we gonna include anything for a ladder truck in the capital items of the budget this year?
Not to sell the existing one, perhaps to continue to try and get it fixed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so,
not to agree to buy another.
okay, so with that said, I believe the public safety capital items total $335,800, is that correct, Greg? If I take out the 22? Do I have a motion to approve the public safety capital budget of $335,800?
So moved.
Second.
Tom moves, Maury seconds. Any more discussion? Take a vote. Andy,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Mike. He's,
I don't think he's available.
okay.
Peter? Or did he drop?
He dropped a while ago. Mike's on, but he must, his
He's on
call
a-
must have been late.
I think he's on a work call.
Yeah. The other is Harbor.
Let's just get the select board on this one.
Okay.
Do I have a motion, for public safety, public safety subtotal of 335,800.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? John,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Becky, Kathy,
Yes.
Ann says yes.
Can I ask a question with respect to continuing to fix ladder 2? Considering people are concerned about going over budget, is there an amount that you're setting or authorizing up to a certain amount to try and get that fixed before it is deemed ready to be sold? Or is it fix it at all costs? Because I don't wanna come back with $100,000 bill and say, you didn't tell me that I could spend that much to try and fix it. So I'm just trying to get some parameters moving forward as to what I'm gonna be able to do to try and remedy that problem.
I think we need to know kind of what the ballpark numbers are here. I mean,
No,
we're sitting
no.
here, and you don't know either.
Well, no, they're still working with Detroit Diesel to see if there even is a fix. It may come down, there's no money to be spent because they can't fix it other than replacing the motor.
Just bring back.
Yeah,
So give proposals before we say yes.
yeah, we
Okay.
don't know what we're talking about.
Well, yeah, I have no numbers to give you, unfortunately.
Okay. Understood.
So did you guys take a vote? Yes.
Yes.
Next is the harbor capital items. The amount of 50,000 for a harbor master plan. Is that correct, Greg?
You have two items, the dredging and the harbor master plan.
Okay, so it's 150,000 total.
150 total.
50 for dredging, 100 for master plan, and 100 of that is coming out of waterways.
Correct.
Okay.
Or grants.
So do I have a motion to approve the harbor capital budget for 150,000?
So moved.
Maury moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Tom seconds. Any discussion?
Question on the ClearGov site, I'm still showing 100,000 for boat storage shed and 400,000 for fisherman's float.
That was
Those
requested.
were requested, so we did not, but I did not advance
Next
those.
column to the right.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
okay.
I'm good.
Ready to vote?
Can I ask what
Yep.
is involved with the master plan, the harbor, for 100,000? What seems expensive for a plan?
So that's an estimated cost to work with the name of the office at UMass Boston, Urban Harbor, something. Anyways, that's an estimate that's been, the range has been from 80 to 150 to do these master plans for harbors. So we would hire them as a consultant, they would work with the steering committee locally to put together that plan.
I have a question, is the grant that you're looking at here, that's kind of like a matching 50-50 split?
So that was my assumption, so
Okay, and is
some
that,
of them, we may be able to get an 80-20 split.
oh, yeah.
So we'll certainly try that, but I was, just to protect, just to cover myself, I did it at a 50-50,
Mhm.
depending on what funding source we were able to secure.
Is the FinCom ready to vote?
Yes.
Take a roll call vote. Andy?
Yes.
Maury?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Sarah votes yes.
Do we have a motion from the select board?
Have a motion? Same motion.
Second.
John
Yeah.
proposes and Brian seconds. Are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Brian? Kathy?
Yes.
And yes. Becky?
We've lost Becky.
Okay.
Oh, boy, it means we lose people.
We clearly aren't entertaining enough.
Okay, so now we're gonna move to the public safety operating budgets. Police is page 102. question mark next to the professional services and what that covers?
So that covers all our onboarding medical exams and psychological exams, and also our current records management system. I think Greg and I have talked about maybe coming up with a plan for the town for HR and some of that stuff not coming out of the operational budget. It's quite a lot of money. It's about $1,300 per hire. But I'm not sure where that stands.
So these the salaries are no longer accurate.
Correct. So you would need to add 160,000 to that line item.
I thought it,
But then you would reduce it by the savings in
OT.
OT.
So the salaries line, we have both combined. We don't have a separate line for OT.
Correct, it's all in one. So that 1.807
Yeah,
includes everything. And so.
that would be increased by 105.
Correct. Well, no, because the 60 is because the 60 is benefit, so we do.
That's a different line.
So it'd be, it's 160 minus 115. So it's a net increase of 45,000.
Okay. And then is there a benefits line under this, or is that?
No, so
different
that's,
budget?
that's a different budget.
Okay.
So I would, your bottom line numbers would increase by 45,000.
So I've got a question on that police salaries line. It's always bothered me a little bit with the reduction in the dispatch headcount, that the number didn't go down more. Is there a headcount that you can assign for fiscal year 2023 compared with 2024?
So the number went down and still absorbed all the salary increases.
I understand there's salary increases that are built in there, but
Right.
the question is in 2023, when we had the dispatchers, and that was 4 more in headcount, correct? I believe?
Yes,
Okay,
Yes.
and now in 2024, those 4 are not in there, but there are 2 more. Well, I mean, we just talked about 2 more here.
right.
Okay,
But so there's a number of moving factors, so
okay.
you had, you did,
People will
you
be
took-
asking this question,
you took away
including me.
you took away the 3 dispatchers, and you reduced your reserve number, which covered dispatch on weekends, basically.
Do you
Yes.
have the waterfall chart?
Andrew has the waterfall chart.
I was gonna ask the same question.
Yeah,
Where are
I'm
the
just trying
savings?
to,
If you could put that up there, Greg, because I have no
Because-
idea what a waterfall chart is, and that's the first opportunity to see one.
I suspect this question will be answered again, asked
Looks
again.
like savings of 113,617.
Andrew, are you there?
Net, even after everything we added back in?
I think if you
I
add
need to give you.
increase this by
permission or-
1.25 and subtract this, the difference is.
But so there's salaries that were savings, but there should be software savings as well.
There won't be until we have the 100%. So we're gonna carry forward the RMS
For 1 more year.
for 1 more year. So we have the dual system while we
Mhm.
transition all the data from the old to the new.
Okay. So you have to keep it for the full year?
Well, I think, I don't think they give
It's a
partial.
one-time fee that we
Yeah, it's a
pay.
one-time fee, yeah.
Do we know when that expires, that agreement?
July.
It expires in July.
So what else in this budget are we saving due to the dispatch going regional? Telephone's down. office supplies are down. Does that have anything to do with dispatch?
I mean,
Minimal.
minimal.
Very, very minimal, yeah, it's really negligible.
The telephone's down is because we don't use, the powder house repeater anymore, and that was the telephone line we paid for going up to that repeater. It's now
Okay.
up to, the water tank, part of the radio infrastructure program.
That's gonna be the dark in the police station.
It looks like the gas is gonna overrun based on federal year, 2022, you overran. Should we put more money into the gas budget?
Well, I think with the 2 electric vehicles, we might be saving
You
a
gotta
little
be
bit.
saving it?
Yeah,
Okay, so that's a justification.
that's kind of my thought of leaving it where it was.
So where are the rest of the dispatch savings?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing them.
So the bulk of it is in the salary line. So that was roughly 200,000 in salaries. There'll be additional savings once we no longer have the RMS cost. And then a good chunk of the savings is from, has been covered by grants that we're no longer getting. So they sort of wash.
Okay.
So it was 72,000 or
Yeah,
so.
that's roughly in that neighborhood, so
Yeah.
next year we won't have that. That was the 901, the state 901 money that we would get for support and incentive and salaries.
So what was the salary increase for the remaining people in this salary line? Because we took out
3.
3 FTEs?
You said
Three
3.
3 FTEs,
So if I subtract out 200
but then there's salary
So-
increases
So
for
here she's
the,
showing,
times.
sorry, that's way too.
on the screen is a more detailed budget. So
I'm
you
seeing a waterfall.
you see the,
Oh, I got it right here.
so dispatcher's salary, so that's the 3 full-time people, was at 182. And so you're showing that 182 savings.
I don't see any decrease in the reserves.
No, that hasn't been,
Correct, that wasn't part of this originally proposed budget. It could have been, but you're certainly seeing that in the revisions when you show the, we cut that significantly down. So you have 109, and so you had 200, almost 210,000 in reserve plus overtime. And so that number's being dropped to
93.
93,000.
Sorry, I'm confused on the reserves.
So are the reserves
So
being eliminated?
Not-
So there'd be there'd be, 20,000 in reserve and 70,000 in overtime, something like that.
Is there any way you could expand that?
Make it bigger.
Make it bigger.
I got it right here.
Yeah, that can help the rest of us.
And, there you go. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
That's better, but
Does it make sense to kind of refresh this based on the decisions that were made tonight? I mean,
I think that was the ultimate plan, once we knew what the staffing was gonna be.
yeah, because I'm confused why we still have a reserves line item. Yeah, because if we're gonna hire two,
So when this was first put together,
right, no, I'm just understanding,
No.
but we just thought we were finagling 45K here, and I'm not so sure anymore, so.
it is.
Okay.
Because that 109 and 100, so that 2095 is being reduced to a total of 93.
I think before we vote on this, we'd
Yeah.
like to see this breakdown
Sure,
Yeah.
with the final
Real
numbers.
that's fine. That's-
Yeah,
That's easily done.
and the question is by when can that be done?
We'll have that for your next meeting.
2/16?
Yeah.
Okay.
Greg,
So
could you just take the action to send, have Andrea send me the waterfall chart?
Yeah.
Separately,
She put
I'd
it
like
in
to
a
see it up.
PowerPoint, which will-
I- Wasn't exactly what I was looking for, so I just wanna make, maybe I'm just not looking at it correctly, so I'd like to have an actual copy if I could get that.
So what she showed as the waterfall was not including the staffing change you just approved tonight.
Oh, I understand,
So does that
They
mean
look a
the
little
net
off.
head count changes -1? 3 dispatchers are not in 24, but we approved 2 new police officers.
Yes.
So essentially, we could say that, all right?
Yes.
I think it's important that information is kind of there.
Yeah.
So-
and I think when it comes time to fill out the warrant and the deliverable for the town meeting, we're gonna wanna really take a good look at the narrative and make sure we're very clear on why things are the way they are, because that's not gonna go over well if we don't get that narrative correct.
So we'll put a hold on this budget. Next is animal control on page 109. $16,315. The same as last year. Do I have a motion to approve the animal control budget in the amount of 16,315? Maury moves. Do I have a
I'll
second?
second.
Dean seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a vote. Andy,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Do I have a motion for, 16,315 for animal control?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? John,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes,
and yes.
So we want to put a hold on the fire department budget until we have more information.
We roll that spreadsheet until it's accurate.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll do the same thing
Yeah.
okay,
for fire. We'll give you the detail on the salary.
okay. Next is harbor, page 116 and page 117. Is that the right page?
Another big master summary right there.
I'm confused because it's got capital in there. Oh, there isn't any, okay, got it.
Yeah, sorry.
So harbor master salary, fuel and oil went down, motor truck repairs went down. Sheriff folks went up. Any question on the harbor master budget? So do I have a motion to approve total salaries and benefits of 191,017 and total other expenses of 26,661 for a total of 217,627?
So moved. Second?
Andy moves, Maury seconds. Any discussion? So Andy,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
and Sarah votes yes.
Do I have a motion for 217,627 for combined expenses and salaries and benefits for the highway department?
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion? Kathy?
yes,
Anne says yes. Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Becky? Okay,
Still not.
She's consistently absent.
She logged off.
Okay.
So that's all we had on the agenda to vote for public safety. So I think that select board can adjourn because the rest of these items weren't on your agenda.
Okay, if they're not on our agenda, we should certainly adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Brian moves, John seconds, any discussion? John,
Yes.
Brian,
Oh, yeah.
Ann, yes, Kathy,
Yes.
Becky, bye.
Wherever you are.
Enjoy those cookies.
There you go.
Remember, they
Pass
locked the
them
bread.
along.
They stopped the van, I don't know what it was.
Well,
Oh,
Did they ever make it to the other side of the road?
they went around and came back and sat in front of
Greg
the
knows,
bar.
yeah, Greg knows how to
You
take care of
coming
it.
straight off the plane? or did you-
yeah, no, my plane landed at 5:30.
So that plane food is keeping you going here.
The luggage came out pretty quick, 'cause-
I've spent
yeah, I'm
some
off of
time,
plane food.
I've spent some time in Salt Lake
Okay.
City.
So
That is one big airport.
where's FinCom still in session?
Fine.
Do that way.
Grants.
Next item, Greg, do you have any updates for us on grants or financial matters?
No, nothing to report.
We're out of here.
Updates from liaisons? No.
We got out of here.
Can you make sure, Greg, that somebody sends us the school committee budget?
Yeah,
I
I'm
looked
surprised I
online
didn't
and
get
it wasn't there.
Yeah, I'll make sure we
And
get it.
I wasn't too happy that I read about it in the Cricket and we hadn't received a copy. So,
Yep, no, we'll track that down. Good night, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, guys.
Do you have any updates on CPC, Andy?
Not that I really want to talk about. no.
Okay, fine. There's no minutes that I've seen.
She sent
She
a
did send a couple.
couple.
Did anybody
I looked
review
through
them?
them. One was the public safety discussion that we had prior, and then the other one was the
117.
school. The school.
Oh,
It was
okay.
DPW and the school.
The 12th and the 26th.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dean.
we can vote next time.
People read them?
I did.
Okay, let's hold till next
I want
time.
full credit for having been.
So noted,
So-
so noted.
So noted, Jim.
So, we're running out of time.
Yes.
We have, can you give us the real drop dead date on the final annual FinCom report? I don't see any way we can make 3/2 if we're not closing out the budget till 2/23. We can't get the numbers into it.
Open.
You can write around it and plug it, but it's been done before.
So we need to get everything to the printer with 3/7.
Okay. Three seven is a Tuesday, okay.
Yep.
Got it. And when will we have the warrant to look at? Is that later?
You'll have that, at your 23rd meeting, you'll have that.
Okay,
I can give you a draft earlier, I can give you a draft by next week.
When does it close? When do,
It's closed in terms of petitions,
okay.
so it's really just the select board, so there's nothing, so we'll have some zoning articles. And there may be a couple of articles on sprinkler systems. There's some local option laws on sprinkler systems. And
Is this
But
having to
besides
do-
that, everything's pretty much plain vanilla beyond that.
Okay.
So there's no, I don't anticipate any special articles besides the zoning. And
They're gonna try it for that again.
there'll be 3 or 4 zoning articles.
Most of them, I think, are
Probably ones that,
relatively non-controversial.
yeah, probably ones that were missed at the last meeting, sort of cut the list off going through it.
Yes.
So it's a continuation of work.
So, 216, we were going to do public health, library, parks and rec.
And then we'll add fire and police just to wrap that up with the new.
Okay, and I think we should do the school district on that day too, on 216, since they
Yep.
voted the budget.
Yep.
And then on 223, we'll do capital budget, held budgets, and the warrant.
I mean, you've done most of the time. We've got a couple 3 that are outstanding.
We've got 5 budgets from the town on hold.
Yep.
2 from public safety.
One from the clerk, was it? Town clerk, I think.
Elections, parking clerk, building, treasurer, and planning. Those were the 5. I had to write them down so that I wouldn't lose track. And you were gonna be making changes to those, right?
To the,
The town budgets.
yes, yeah, yes.
Now, I think one of the concerns I have is with all of the changes, how we're gonna pay for it.
Yes, so we've got
and-
a new summary sheet that we can review with you.
Good. After all the changes have been made, a new summary sheet.
Yep.
Would be helpful.
It's got the new school number in it and everything. That's the big one.
I tried to doing things manually before these changes we made tonight, and it looked to me like taxes will be increase of about 4%. But with these things, it will go up a little more. And that was assuming that we increase the local revenue
Revenues,
assumption
yeah.
by 259,000.
So is that,
So the other option is, so we haven't been using the capital exclusion for some of our capital, so we could do that. It doesn't change the bottom line in terms of taxation, but
Right.
it's a little different approach.
And that works if we include Brook Street, our portion of, our segment of Brook Street in that,
It's in
the
there.
400K?
Yeah, that's in there. That's in the capital, yes.
Would we be able to reduce our, I mean, we went up to an extra 4 million, an extra million on capital. If we were to cut some of those, like, there's a lot of money in for water main replacement, but Chuck has already said he can't get piped this year, so.
But I thought he said that was the cost of Pleasant Street, and he needed to do Pleasant Street before they did the culvert and sent all the cars down Pleasant.
he was considering doing Pleasant in lieu of another chunk that required a lot of new pipe material, and Pleasant would be,
Okay, for the relining then, not the, okay,
Right.
so it's not replacement, okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Piping upgrades. But we do have an extra million in those projects that maybe we could pull some of that back to minimize the tax increase. Would that,
I don't quite see where we're gonna get it from. Now, the other discussion we had was reserves based on only the town budget,
oh, yeah,
town
versus,
operating
versus town and
versus
school.
total. Whether we want to consider that any. If I could find the reserves again.
So again, I would only do that towards capital. I wouldn't
Right,
do it
yes.
towards Operating.
And Greg, the discussion there was about the split between Highland Field and the district's portion of Brook Street, how that gets handled. How the two towns are thinking of different ways, different mechanisms for paying for that. And we were talking about either a capital exclusion on that,
The debt
or
The debt exclusion.
debt exclusion, yeah, I'm
yeah.
sorry, debt exclusion,
Capital would be
excuse
too
me.
big.
Yeah,
for
yeah, I
capital.
was thinking debt.
But a debt exclusion, you know, you could do a 5-year note.
I think that's what we have to do.
That's what
Yeah.
that's what this,
Now, can we do that unilaterally, or that has to be something the school does, correct?
Would be a school.
Yeah, school debt exclusion.
Right.
So when will they make their decision?
I think they decided that the other night, did they not?
I didn't hear the meeting, I was away on Tuesday.
Yeah, I had a conflict, and then by the time I got on, they were done, so.
Oh, I did numbers off of what they said, and I decided they did the debt exclusion. Because the total was up by 848, it was adding back in 3 things
Yes,
from
that's
the
right.
third column
Yeah,
to the
That's right.
second, and it didn't come out exactly the numbers that were in the paper, but it was close.
did it include Brook Street or?
No, I think they did that, the Brook and Highland, I think they're doing a debt exclusion.
No, I know,
Correct.
but they were also thinking about not doing Brook.
N-
I think they stopped thinking about not doing Brook.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ann.
I think it was a timing issue and they've been able to catch up on that.
Yeah.
Bids and other things.
They thought it would be cheaper, I think.
A little bit cheaper, but one fewer vote.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yep. So do we know where we're headed, Greg?
Yes, I know it feels a little, still, yeah, a lot of curveballs there, but it's coming together, and the numbers will work.
I mean,
I mean, obviously with the school budget, it'll be a hefty tax increase.
Right.
We can do it as we have levy capacity to
Right.
cover it. So it means we don't need the special vote, but it will still be a tax increase.
But where Essex being the governor on this, do any updates on where they are?
the paper said they were doing an override.
Oh, really?
That's what
Yes.
the paper said. The
Yes.
paper said we didn't need to do an override, but they did. And I said, well, I think that's very interesting, because we hadn't decided what we were doing. I mean, we could decide to do an override instead of using excess levy capacity,
Right.
Right.
if you wanted it to go to vote, but,
Right.
not sure it's worth it.
I think it would be. Yes.
Probably have another big vote coming at some point, which is Essex Elementary, depending on that time frame. And I don't know,
Right.
4 years out from now, 3 years out
They
from
said they
now?
were applying this year.
It just depends if they get in the first round, whether, if they get a yes on the first ask.
Is that something the school committee voted to support?
Yes.
They did.
But they,
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see anything change from when we were looking at it back when we were thinking about Memorial, to be honest with you.
It seems like the time frame has been advanced. But
well, and what happened with the Memorial is recall, they applied and got approved in the first round, so it came,
Right, which was unexpected.
Yeah.
right, and if they're doing the same thing with Essex Memorial.
It's a bit of a crapshoot, you just don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah.
They could get lucky again, or they could take 4 tries.
It's
It's,
fine.
you just
That
don't
would be
know.
good.
it's like the fire truck, if we can wait and Band-Aid, that's a good thing. Sorry about the analogy.
The bid report will be out in, I think, mid-March.
What will be out in mid-March?
The Beebe report,
It'll be
the
Oh, on
consultant
the,
that did
the elementary school, okay.
No, so there is a report out now, but
Yeah.
It's a preliminary,
the preliminary.
Preliminary.
and apparently they've managed to make it even worse in refining it.
All right.
I think I sort of have to divide that by some number, like 2 or something, but yeah.
anything else we need to discuss? Any concerns, anything anybody wants? Feed information to Greg regarding where we're headed?
I think we said it all.
But, so the difference between the FinCom and Select Board votes on
I-
fire department tonight,
I-
you know, we can anticipate how that would play out on town meeting floor,
Is
you
it
know.
about 62,000?
It was like 45.
45.
I mean, I think that we can have another discussion about it
Okay,
when we discuss the fire department budget.
Yeah.
Because that would be
Yeah.
our final vote. That would be our unofficial vote of whether we want to go to task over.
I think at the end of the day, it's a
45,000.
philosophical discussion,
is.
which is both boards are moving in a south direction. It's just the finance committee wants to run a little faster in that
Right.
direction.
Finance committee is exasperated.
To say the least.
Can I ask a clarifying question about your schedule?
Yes,
So, and maybe it's a question for Greg, I'm not sure, but you mentioned next Thursday you're discussing specific topics. The select board does not have a joint meeting with FinCom next Thursday.
no, we have no more joint
We
meetings.
have no more joint meetings.
So we're just doing our budget.
You're doing your budget, so will those items discussed next Thursday, are those gonna be coming to the select board in some form?
Yes, so on the,
Where we will vote on them at a different time?
so on the 21st, we'll do,
The 21st is
Yes.
when we're gonna vote on that.
I don't know if you'll certainly get a discussion and update whether or not you vote then or your meeting on the 6th will be a
Okay, but
judgment
it won't be
call.
next Thursday.
Correct.
Okay, good, that's right, thank you.
So do I need? I think when I do the agenda for 216, I'll put on everything we haven't voted on.
good idea.
You might as well.
And then I'll do the same agenda for 220, I'll do the agenda for 223, anything not voted on plus the warrant.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay,
That way, if things go quicker, then you can keep going. You can get ahead of the game a little bit, and gives you that option.
okay.
Is it possible to look at I keep pointing here, the multi-year?
Yeah, we worked on that today.
I feel like being able to say we've done it is important, and
Yes.
frankly, all of us looking at it and saying, what's triggering this item in year 4, and
Right.
just that forward look is important.
Yes,
Maybe, can we have that by next week?
yes.
Okay.
That'd be
That's what we're
great.
aiming for.
If there's a tweaking, then we could look at it the week after too, but that'd be good. And then you probably do auditors, and is this a Dan Sherman year? That would all happen after we go
That'd
to the
happen
press.
afterwards, yeah.
Later on.
Yeah, we'll wait till after town meeting, or after due date for early March.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Andy
Yes.
moves, Maury seconds, vote. Tom?
Yes.
Dean?
Yes.
Maury?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And Sarah votes yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a long meeting.
Thank you, I appreciate your
guys.
staying power.
Thank you.
As I said, my blood pressure rises.